October 26th. Okay. Board of Education meeting to order. Please rise for the pledge. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, welcome everybody who's here, and we are streaming, right? Yes, we are streaming, so welcome everybody watching at home. First order of business is actually comments from the public on agenda items only. So if anyone would like to speak on anything on the agenda for this evening, please come up, state your name, and your affiliation to the district where you live, whatever. So, anybody? Okay. Yes, no? Is somebody standing up there? All right, just raise your hand. Yeah, we got a little back feed here.
Sorry, just one.
Let them, they'll fix the mics. Don't worry.
Okay.
You know, we can't hear you. A little louder, please. Yeah.
I haven't said anything. The mic's not working.
No, I'm not saying anything yet. The young lady has the floor here. As soon as we get the mics fixed.
Sure. Quick question.
Testing, 1, 2, 3. Testing.
I don't know if it's on the agenda to talk about the DEI committee.
About what?
DEI.
That's not on the agenda this evening, so if you don't mind, if you
I could say, that's what I was going to ask. Thank you.
Perfect, thank you. Anything on the agenda? Okay, fine. High school students report.
Good evening. We hope to have a junior representative to accompany me next month. We are still in the works of getting one, so for right now, it's just me.
Okay. You're going to have to start, so let him fix his legal first.
Yeah.
And then if you don't mind, start over. And hold it close.
Okay.
I can't hear it, so.
Mute everything else.
Technical difficulties. We work around them. All right, why don't you give it a roll, see if it works now. Just hold the mic close.
You have your mic up,
Hello?
You have your mic up?
Right here. Hello? Can you hear me?
Turn Vito's mic on real quick. We have everything else muted. We just have our mic on.
I don't know. We'll try. Can you hear me now? How about now?
Turn on Vito's mic.
Okay? Sorry, everybody in the back. All right, we seem to be getting there, so go ahead.
Hello?
Okay,
You
turn
good?
on 3. Turn on Vito.
Nothing.
Well, you know what you do? Speak as loud as you can.
Okay.
Okay?
Good evening. We hope to get a junior representative by next month, but for right now, it's just me. To start, 2 weeks ago was Spirit Week in the high school. This tradition always gets students pumped during the week and for the games to follow. The officers of EGO stood at the entry point of the school, playing upbeat music and greeting students excitedly as they came into the school in the morning to set the tone for a good day and overall a good week. To follow this Spirit Week on Saturday, the boys and girls soccer team as well as the football team had their homecoming games and all 3 teams were victorious. Students were excited to be in the stands again cheering for their home team and being part of Eagle Nation with limited restrictions. This past month, all of the fall sports teams had their senior games. This is where they honor seniors and their families with a small rose ceremony. The boys soccer team won their first sectional game last week and will continue their strong season in semifinals tomorrow against Lakeland. The girls and boys volleyball team will also start their sectional games next week. These students all hope to take home section champs for the Eagles. Interest meetings are starting up for winter sports as fall sports begin to conclude in a few weeks. The Student Athletic Council continues to promote the online clothing store full of Eastchester apparel for students, parents, faculty, and alumni to purchase and enjoy. If you are interested, the store can be accessed through SportsU or by clicking the link in the bio of the Eagle Nation's Instagram. 2 weeks ago, EGO ran a successful blood drive at the high school, having many donors, and their blood will go and impact the lives of those in need. They plan to host another one in the spring. Additionally, EGO's fundraiser for breast cancer awareness, called Real Kids Wear Pink, was a huge success, selling over 650 pink masks to the high school students, and this money went for donation. Students were encouraged to wear pink last Friday to support this fundraiser, and the cafeteria was filled with pink decorations. The National Honor Society was notified this month if they were accepted. They recently had their first meeting where they discussed the duties of being in the Honor Society and the number of hours they were required to tutor others. Seniors are thrilled to have the 26th Annual Fashion Show fundraiser back and running. The fashion show is an event where certain clothing stores partner up with students, giving them a chance to strut down the runway in their finest clothing. This event is open to faculty, friends, and family, and is such a fun event to watch. This year's fashion show will be happening at the Green Tree Country Club on November 10th, and seniors who are participating couldn't be happier. As November approaches, so does the early action, early decision deadlines for college. Early decision is a binding agreement, meaning that if the student is accepted to that school, he or she will be definitely attending in the fall. Early action is non-binding, but a chance for students to submit their application earlier, which allows them to hear back from that college by December or January. With that being said, this is crunch time for seniors who are interested in these submission options, and students will have been meeting with their guidance counselors to ask questions and finalize their application. Also, college visits will continue for juniors and seniors to attend and learn more about a particular college and the activities they have to offer through a representative from that school. Finally, the Wellness Club is currently hosting a Wellness Week for students. Different activities and free samples are being put out daily in the cafeteria during each lunch period in hopes to relieve stress and encourage students to take a break during the school day. That is all for today, and as always, feel free to ask any questions. Thank you.
All right, thank you. You did very well in the circumstances. Thank you. I think the mics might be working now. You might want to say hello to you. Just
Hello?
oh, there you go. Sorry about that, everybody. Okay, great. So, thank you. If you've got schoolwork to do, you're welcome to stay. You're welcome to leave. But thank you for reporting. Okay, next. Board committee reports. Do we have any committee reports today? Yes, Chrissy, go right ahead.
PTA? Want it to be PTA? Okay. The Waverly PTA, they talked about the PTA objectives for the year, including building community through hosting PTA events, improving student in-school experience, and bringing enrichment programs to school. The PTA donated 12 picnic tables for outdoor lunch. They donated new games and activities for recess, and they're working on improvements to the playground. Enrichment, they are providing a variety of after-school clubs, and kindergarten and first grade are having field trips to the Greenberg Nature Center, and they also had, Cultural Arts had a fire safety event. Ways and Means is working really hard to have a fun social school year for the kids, and they had a great, successful back-to-school picnic with lots of food, face painting, a DJ, ice cream truck. Kids had a great time.
Just hold the mic closer. Hold the mic closer.
They
Thank
had
you.
a great trunk or treat with a DJ and food trucks and pumpkin decorating. There were lots of parent questions. They talked about the parking situation at Waverly and asked about the church lot. They also asked about when school lunch would begin, the option to buy lunch. And there was a long discussion on the outdoor masks and the policy changes. And parents asked for more transparency about that. That's it.
Okay, thank you, Chrissy. Anybody else have a committee report to give? No? No? Okay. All righty, thank you. Okay, what do we have next? Yes, superintendent's report.
Okay, we will plan to go to the podium, okay?
Go right ahead. I'll get out of your way here.
I don't like going to the podium, but it's the only place where I can do the PowerPoint from, so thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So I have just really 3 components to this report tonight. I'm not doing all of the components or giving them. A substantial portion of the report tonight will be given by other people who have prepared some very detailed information that you will want to know about. But really we have 3 things. We have a celebration, then we have a report about our capital facilities plan, and lastly some general information. So first, celebration time. As they say at Ann Hutch, time to recognize. I have a recognition. Come on, Ann Hutch people, you know. I have a recognition. Yay. Recognize, right? There we go. All right. Very good. I'm here to recognize our Board of Education tonight. And from Waverly, we have a very special poster that was put together. So thank you, Waverly students, for recognizing the Board of Education and making this for them. And I have a video that was produced by Ms. Reardon's class at Eastchester Middle School. So let's see if that will actually open up and play. Woohoo! I think it's really fitting to have something like an art display. Oh, I don't want to do this again. Not again. It was wonderful, but we need to move on. There we go. So in a moment we're going to move on to the capital plan proposal, but so I don't go back to that video and watch it a second time, we'll just leave it on this slide. I think it's really important and fitting that we look at art projects like we saw, because a thoughtful Board of Education recognizes that education is about the whole child, whether it be about the arts, whether it be about athletics, helping every student to find their passion and become their very best version of themselves, to grow and develop. That's what a Board of Education does when it's thoughtful and when it has a commitment to whole child education, as our Board of Education does. And I want to recognize our Board of Education tonight because this is the week in New York State in which we recognize boards of education, and our board here takes their role as citizen leaders very responsibly overseeing the education of Eastchester's youth. Boards of education guide their local school systems and ensure public schools are flexible and responsive to the needs of the community. And school boards are comprised of volunteers, most of whom do not receive any compensation across the state for their service, nor do our board members receive any compensation, and they simply serve and they give of their time and their talents generously. They're individuals within the community who dedicate their time and themselves to improving public education. School board members statewide collectively oversee more than 2.35 million K-12 students and $76.5 billion in spending. With school children as their primary focus, school board members create a shared vision for the future of education. They set the direction of the school district to achieve the highest student performance. They provide accountability to student achievement results. They develop a budget and they present it to the community annually. They align district resources to improve achievement, and they support a healthy school district culture in which to work and learn. I want to take an opportunity to specifically recognize our 8 board members, currently 8, soon to be 9 again, as they're interviewing for the vacant trustee seat right now. And when I call your name, if you would please, and I don't know if these are in any particular order, perhaps alphabetical, perhaps not, but as I call your name, would you please come from your seat and stand before our audience tonight just to be recognized? Ms. Chrissy Gagin. Ms. Christy McCloskey. Yes, you can applaud. Mr. Vito Catania. Dr. Cheryl Smith. Mr. Jonah Rizzo-Blakeman. Thank you. Dr. Jackie DeMarco. Mr. Stephen Perjansky's not able to be with us yet, but we're expecting him any moment. And Mr. Judah Holstein, if you'd come on up, please. I've worked with a lot of boards of education in my time, and I've always enjoyed the collaboration that we have. Every board is different, unique, special, talented in its own way, and this Board of Education certainly is right near the top. They work so hard, they're so dedicated. Whenever I need them, they're there. Whenever you reach out, they're reading your emails, they're talking on the phone. When they run into you in the community, they're listening, and they're taking that information and talking amongst themselves, helping the administration make good decisions with that information. I couldn't ask for a more willing and able and capable and dedicated group of people to get to work with, and it's my pleasure and honor to work with your Board of Education, Eastchester's Board of Education. Let's give them a great round of applause for their service. Any words of wisdom, Mr. President?
All I could say is thank you. I saw this on the agenda, but I didn't know you were going to go through the lengths here. And it looks like we're going to be educating some police sketch artists in over time. So
Absolutely, we have some amazing artists.
Really, really cool. So, but thank you. Anybody
you.
else want to say something here? This is a team effort, guys. It's not a, we all speak as one. So, and we represent you guys. So, guys and gals.
I'll just say this is very unexpected, honestly, and I have to say I'm really touched by this. This is a lot of hard work. We've only just begun, so just give us a little time, and we're all working together. The effort of our students, our children.
All right, good. Anybody else? Okay.
Thank you.
Back to business.
All right, back to business. Thank you. Now we're going to take some time to talk about a capital plan proposal that we've been working on. We talked about this at last week's work session. Our Assistant Superintendent for Business, Lisa Sanfilippo, has been working with our architectural and engineering teams at Mamasi, our construction manager at Aris, and they're going to come up and talk to you a little bit. And Lisa, are there any introductory remarks that you would like to make as they make their way up? Thank you. Please come on up.
I don't think my mic is working. So I'll just speak loudly. So as Dr. Glass said, Tina and Daryl from Mamasi, our architects and engineers, are here to give a presentation regarding an infrastructure and security bond that we are contemplating for this year. In addition is Paul Tazi from Aris Contracting. They are the construction managers on this project. So we've begun conversations over the past couple of months based on our building condition survey, which is a report to the state of the condition of our buildings. So based on that information, we are looking to do a bond referendum. Maybe we're thinking in February at some point. So with that said, if Tina wants to go ahead and start with her presentation.
Great, thank you. Just before I start, can everybody hear me? Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you for having us. Many of you may, particularly the board, we shared this information a couple weeks ago, but of course we built on the information and to answer some of the questions from the last meeting. But for our community members that are here, this may be new to you, so we wanted to take the time to make sure that we address this from the start. So tonight we are going to cover the basis of the capital project. We'll go through the assessments and the findings that we've been through. We'll talk about the goals of the project. We'll get into detail of the scope of work and the value of the cost of the work per building and a total project cost. We will talk through the timeline, both for a bond and the potential sequencing of construction. And then we will answer questions and have some discussion as needed. So this is a really important slide because it really is sort of the basis of the capital project, and it talks about what we've been through since 2018. So many of you are aware in 2018 and 19 we had been developing a safety and security bond. And that was really to address some of the basic components of school safety that your buildings were lacking. And the idea of layering safety measures. That bond was put, there was a vote that was set, a resolution was passed, but because of COVID, it was basically taken off the table right, I think in March, is that right? But we learned a lot from that process, and we had developed a pretty intense scope of work based on that. In 2020, the state requires that each district do a building condition survey, and it's on a 5-year cycle. We did perform that for the district. The findings of that is that all of the buildings were deemed unsatisfactory by the state education department. And that really gets into non-functioning items, critical failing items throughout the buildings, and it describes how to correct those items and provides a cost related to that. Further, we did a district-wide facilities survey and assessment that was an extensive analysis of all the buildings and the condition, really beyond the state's requirements, to really better understand not just the conditions of the buildings, but what the impact of that might be moving forward. So it looked at corrective measures, best practices, and bringing the buildings up to an acceptable standard. What we did find is that most of the systems met code at the time of installation, but do not meet current codes. So for example, the buildings lack accessibility, like toilet rooms and basic spaces. The structures in general are aging, your infrastructure. So a lot of the systems, the mechanical, electrical, and plumbing systems are original to the buildings. There are deteriorating floors and ceilings throughout buildings. And the HVAC systems are somewhat adequate pre-pandemic, but don't really address current concerns related to health and wellness and safety and security. Some of the general needs include site and athletic field stormwater improvements and basic parking, paving, and some site security work. What this assessment did not do is that it didn't address any instructional and or programming related improvements. So the goals for the district are really to address the health wellness and safety and security of students, faculty, and staff, and doing that through correcting, improving infrastructure. This slide in particular is actually very important, and it really starts to set the picture of understanding the age of your buildings and understanding where capital investments have been made over the course of the last 25 years. So the information on the left shows that shows the square footage of buildings that are older than 1970 or 50 plus years, and that's about 347,000 square feet of space. And you can see what the breakdown of that is per school. And that's 66% of the buildings are 50 plus years or older. The information on the right shows where your investments have been made. But it's important, I think, to understand that over the last 25 years, funds were spent on building additions, and that was to address enrollment at the time. So again, you can see the breakdown from 1996 to 2015, and where capital funds were used. Since 1996, $63.6 million of 73.3, which equates to about 87% of capital funds, were spent on building additions and new construction. And of that remaining 13%, none of it was really spent on modernizing building infrastructures and systems, other than really critical failing items like roofs and boilers and things that really had to be addressed. And again, this is because the need at the time was enrollment. It wasn't focused on your buildings. We'll go into the scope and value of all of the work related to the assessments and the findings, and how that has begun to develop into a capital project. But I think it's important to understand that your existing buildings, though they look great on the outside, and they really do, and they're kept very well, they're clean, the facilities are remarkable, but this scope of work is really what is a lot of the pieces that you don't see. So it's the failing infrastructure, and it's time to make an investment in that. We've talked about putting a maintenance plan in place, but unfortunately a maintenance plan doesn't actually work until you fix the basic infrastructure components. So the scope of work that has been developed is really categorized into 5 sections. It's safety and security, health and wellness, accessibility, infrastructure and building maintenance, and site improvements and storm drainage. I think as we go through this, you'll understand that these are really basic components to your building. There are there's no fluff, there's no excessive space. It's your buildings, it's your building structure, and the systems that support it. So when we look at safety and security, we're really talking about a layered approach. Secure entrance vestibules from the outside in, exterior door replacements, interior door replacements, and hardware. Systems in general. Lock sets included in that, exterior lighting, and safety and security devices across your schools. Health and wellness is really, also includes the basic components related to clean air and thermal comfort, which is a key strategy for maintaining healthy environments to learn while minimizing the spread of airborne particles. So this is really focused on ventilation, clean filtered air, better lighting quality, cleaner drinking water, healthy building materials, and equity for all students. Accessibility, very straightforward. It's being able to access each piece of your facility, so toilet rooms, floor levels, interior and exterior stairs, ramps, and even parking spots. Infrastructure and building maintenance. This is really related to the original systems of your buildings. We're talking about steam conversion to hot water, mechanical equipment, domestic water piping, electrical panels, electrical services, backflow preventers, fire alarm systems, asbestos abatement, ceilings and lighting, classroom casework, and classroom flooring. And then site improvements and storm drainage are actually very limited in this, but they're really focused on selective repaving at the high school, baseball field and softball field improvements related to stormwater, and a high school bus loop. So Daryl's going to talk a little bit about how the scope of work breaks down.
Hey everyone. So the next few slides are really, what they're going to show you is a lot of the scope of work amongst these buckets, for lack of a better term, are very interrelated across each other. So this one is the safety and security, and what this shows is that a lot of the safety and security items also address infrastructure and accessibility. The one that really stands out here is the secure entrance vestibules. This is something we proposed in 2018 and 2019 pre-COVID. And what this provides, and you'll see on the next page, there's some diagrams that show new secure entrance vestibules for each school, which is really, there's a separate student and visitor entrance and a security office. Oh, sorry, can you hear me? Okay. Interior and exterior door hardware replacements, standard keying across the district, exterior lighting improvements, security systems, which includes video surveillance, card access, intrusion detection, and then window replacements, specifically like Greenbelt, the annex building, some of the old single pane glass. So these are the diagrams of the proposed secure entrance vestibules at each school. Ann Hutch and Greenvale, they're built within the existing structure. Waverly, you can see in the dashed line, is a very small new construction addition. And then right outside of here, the high school entrance is where a new main entrance will be built. So when you drive up to the building, you'll actually see the big high school, middle school main entrance. And outside of that will also include bus loop improvements. Next is the health and wellness, like Tina alluded to. This bucket is focused mainly on ventilation and clean filtered air in every classroom and occupied space. So what this addresses is installing ventilation. For instance, at Ann Hutch, the majority of the classrooms in that building only have operable windows and no actual ventilation systems. But there are a lot of spaces throughout each school building in the district that only have operable windows and no mechanical ventilation. So what this addresses is providing not only ventilation, but filtration in each of these buildings in each space. Replacing older mechanical ventilation and heating units, which includes like the rooftop units for the gymnasiums, things like that. Upgrading existing ventilation systems, exhaust systems, HVAC controls. Not the most exciting stuff, but in these times, what it does is it really provides newer equipment and clean, filtered, fresh air to all the classes and for all the building occupants. Accessibility, what it really addresses is toilet room renovations across each school building, exterior ADA access improvements, interior ADA access improvements, parking signage and striping, and locker room renovations at the middle school. Now, this is infrastructure and building maintenance, which is a big portion of this project. But what you'll see is a lot of these items are also intertwined with health and wellness and safety and security. So for instance, classroom ceiling and lighting replacements, corridor ceiling and lighting replacements. Health and wellness nowadays is fresh, clean, filtered air, but it's also better quality lighting. And what this provides is new lighting in your classrooms, which happens to be a byproduct of us having to, or the district having to replace a lot of the old original piping systems in the building, which a lot of it is actually above the ceilings. So to access the piping that's original to the buildings that are failing, that need to be replaced, you're pulling down the ceilings, you're pulling down all the lighting, so now you might as well just put new ceiling, lighting, sometimes it's under the floor, new flooring. Casework replacements are really the systems that go around, mechanical ventilation systems within the classrooms. So those will need to be replaced. They're in very poor condition. Floor abatement, so like there's some of the subfloors and under the carpeting and layers below, there's floor systems that need to be abated and replaced. Ceiling and wall repairs, fire stopping in select areas, replacing boiler room equipment. Again, like I just mentioned, replacing original heating piping systems, converting boilers to hot water. So what that means is, in some of the buildings, you have very old steam systems, which is a very antiquated way of heating buildings. Plus, the steam piping is failing. Steam traps have to constantly be maintained and replaced. So it's actually a lot of work on the facilities and maintenance staff to maintain this old steam system that's failing anyway. So by providing mechanical ventilation, it gives the district an opportunity to rerun all the mechanical ventilation with hot water, which is a much more efficient, easily maintainable, more robust system that will last the district for a long time. So that's what replacing heating system piping, converting existing boilers, that's what that means. Domestic water piping is basically your drinking water, your potable water. A lot of those piping systems are original to the building. They're in need of replacement. Installing backflow preventers for water services, which basically means there's no cross-contamination between the site utilities and the building utilities as far as sanitary and water systems. Electrical service upgrades, specifically at Greenvale and Waverly. The electrical service size is not large enough in either one of those buildings to provide those buildings with mechanical ventilation. They're also very old, original switchboards and transformers that need to be replaced anyway. Fire alarm system upgrades, which that's at the high school in Waverly. That's adding additional devices. Auditorium ceiling and lighting replacements at Ann Hutch. And then masonry restoration in Greenville. And then site improvements, as Tina mentioned, is mostly stormwater. Right out here next to the high school baseball and softball field, drainage improvements, adding visitor bleachers next to the field outside and an accessible path to get to those visitors' bleachers. Also bus loop improvements right out here in front of what we're proposing to be the new entrance. And then repaving and selective parking, roadways, and entrances.
So I'm going to try to keep these next set of slides brief because it is a lot of information to take in. But these are the next set starts to break down the cost of the project per school and kind of summarizes the scope of work. One of the things I think important to point out is that the new proposed entrance at the high school does a number of things. It addresses safety and security first and foremostly, provides an identifiable entrance, which is also related to safety and security, and it provides a means of accessible entrance, which currently does not exist. And so that is the image on the right sort of demonstrates where the location of this addition might be, and the diagrams at the bottom show where you access it. I won't go through each of these, but essentially it breaks down the cost of the safety and security, the health and wellness, accessibility, infrastructure, building maintenance, and athletic field and site improvements, and it shows sort of graphically across the buildings where all this work is happening. So for example, the blue is all related to heating and ventilation replacements, both in ceilings and lighting replacements, which is really to address the hot water piping installation, similarly to the corridors as well. Paul, if you want to add anything at this point, or
well, to develop the numbers, my team, I'm Paul Tozzi from Harris Contracting. And my team went through the buildings to identify, to review the scope that's been identified by the architects so that we can understand the existing conditions for basically putting cost on it. So we did that through the summer and then started costing out the individual items. We kept the same program as in each, as Darryl said, buckets, so that we costed it out and basically put a value on each individual item, and what you're looking at is the summary of each school. Without going into each number specifically, that's the cost we're looking at per school.
And I think, as Paul mentioned, we have been working together, both the construction management team, the architecture team, and the engineering team, developing the scope of work, walking through the buildings, verifying it again, meeting again. And so it's been a very extensive process to reaffirm the scope that is being developed for the district. This is showing the middle school. Again, I won't go through each item, but you can begin to understand the scope of work across the school and how much of the school we are touching. In this case, 90% of the building would be renovated. And Hutch, at Ann Hutch, there is a lot of classroom work to address ventilation across the classrooms and the corridors, and then some additional work at some of the large spaces for ventilation. Again, a secure vestibule, some work related to the electrical rooms, toilet renovations as one of the items across all the schools that we will be addressing.
And all the ceilings at Ann Hutch have been identified as containing asbestos. So we have to, this quite a large abatement to occur during that, not in that building.
And at Greenvale, we do have some window replacement related to the original windows on the annex. Again, if we were to look back at the past slide, that's addressing a number of concerns, infrastructure, safety and security, and not to mention just energy efficiency from modern storefront system versus what was constructed originally. And then Waverly has probably not the least amount of work potentially. A lot of the classroom the ceilings themselves are not being replaced, but there's a socket that runs along all the classrooms that would be replaced to accommodate the piping. Unit ventilation and caseboard replacement across most of the classrooms, lower classrooms. And then I'll turn it over to Paul.
On the summary of costs going on throughout the district, what we did is we also put together, using the same program as before, across the district-wide safety and security, it is a $14,105,000 cost. That is less expensive than, or less costly than what was proposed in 2020, the one you were going to vote on. Mainly because we changed the interior door systems from a bullet-resistant door to a solid door, which will give you the same protections and save us some money. And that's what we're looking at there. The health and wellness, again, looking at the health and wellness, it's the air side of the systems. That's $11.5 million. Accessibility is primarily the bathrooms throughout all the schools, and $7.5 million. The infrastructure, I'm sorry, my glasses fall confusing. The infrastructure is the largest portion of the project, and across the district equates to just about $32 million to replace the fix the infrastructure here. The athletic fields and site improvements is again, that's a minor portion of the project, which is $2 million. We were asked to identify an air cooling alternate also, to have an option for if you decide to basically start cooling the building, since we're doing this much work throughout. So we did this, and the air cooling side proposal is $7.5 million. What we did at that time, at the last meeting, what was identified was, can we break out the air cooling and the safety and security so that you had a better idea of what each one of these come to. So we broke this out, and on the safety and security, and again, this is district-wide. We have on the secured entrances, $2.9 million. The interior door replacements is $5.5. That's including intruder lock sets. The exterior door replacements with bullet-resistant glass and treatments and window glass treatments is 2.2. Exterior lighting is 1.2. Security devices, $1 million. And the annex windows at Greenville is also basically a little over $1 million. So the total, that's how that safety and security breaks down. Now, one of the reasons why I wanted to break it out and show you this in this fashion is the only item, and as Darryl was explaining when you were looking at the slides with the bullets, the only item that doesn't have a direct interrelationship to another item, such as infrastructure or accessibility, is the secured entrances. Your interior doors, although what this proposal is doing is hardening your interior doors and providing intruder lock sets, your interior doors are not only need to be replaced for safety and security, but they don't meet any of the present fire codes either. So you're required to have a self-closing, self-latching lever handset on each door on a fire-rated door. We don't have that in a lot of the instances. So this is for so the interior doors are really an infrastructure. The exterior doors is an accessibility issue, and that's in the same thing. It could be part of the infrastructure. Same thing with exterior lighting. We should be looking to light the exterior buildings correctly so that you can see when you're moving through the dark, which is part of an accessibility area. Security devices and windows are pretty much explanatory. That's the camera systems and window systems are replacing just the single glass, the single pane glass that's in Greenville in the annex building only. The other area that we were asked to look at was, dealing with the air cooling. The $7.5 million, and let me explain that one because that one is, I think, needs an explanation. The $7.5 million incorporates adding cooling into the building at the same time we're doing the heating systems. So what I mean by that is when we're replacing the piping for the heating systems, that we enlarge the piping to accommodate the cooling systems at the same time. So we put chillers on the building and then additional pumps so that you can use the same piping. It's considered a two-pipe system of what would be installed to cool the buildings. There are other options that you can go with, and one of them is a four-pipe system where two pipes are run for just supply and return on the heat side, the hot water, and the other two are supply and return on the chilled water to provide cooling. That system we priced that one also for this district, and that one came up to about $12 million to do a four-pipe system. So we opted to, through team meetings, we went with the 7.5. The only thing I have to explain is the 7.5 is figured in while you're replacing the rest of the systems. If you don't replace it at the same time, and you want to basically back off, which is fine, at a later time, you have to go back to that $12 million number because we're only going to put heating piping in the size we need for the heating piping. To do the piping, let's say upgrade the piping to a larger pipe now would mean another $3.7 million is what it came out to upcharge it. So half of the pricing is the upgrade in the piping, half of the price is installing the chillers and the pumps. So give you an idea where that one is.
Could you just repeat, I'm sorry, what would the amount be if we don't do it now? You said
it's a little over $12 million.
I heard you say that would be for a four-pipe system, not for a two.
Correct. Well, the two-pipe system is what we would install if you want to do it with the rest of the project. The four-pipe system is what we would have to install if we already install a two-pipe system now. And then you install air conditioning down the road.
But if you installed air conditioning down the road on the same two-pipe system, it wouldn't be $12 million.
Well, what we would need to do is enlarge the piping now. So then your price for the mechanical piping on the heating side would increase by $3.7 million.
I don't understand. The last time we had this discussion at the work session, we were talking about the advantages of a two-pipe system versus a four-pipe system.
Correct.
And the four-pipe system being more, a better design for a school district that's in an area that has vast temperature swings during the day, as opposed to somewhere in the north where we're either going to be heating or cooling. We're never going to do both on the same day. So we would never need a 4-pipe system. So the question, I thought Cheryl's question was, if we put in a 2-pipe system and don't choose to do air conditioning now, what would be the cost to add air conditioning later to the same 2-pipe system? Is that what you asked? Because if you didn't, I'm asking.
You have elaborated.
The piping changes. So when we're going with cooling and heating, we would have to put in a larger size piping to basically handle the cooling and heating.
Right, but you can do cooling or heating now by making a change in the boiler room.
Right.
Seasonally, you could say October 1st we go to heating, and March 15th we go to cooling, correct?
No, correct. What I was trying to explain is the $7.5 million is what the cost of the air cooling based on the increase in that piping is, half of that number is increased size of piping. So it's additional piping. So you would basically, if you said, all right, I want to increase the piping, we have to increase our estimates by 3.7 million, it's 3.7 million, to carry the infrastructure to carry the cooling at a later time. So it's,
Please, want to hear him explain?
If we're going to carry the infrastructure for the cooling, so you can add it in later, we would have to add the additional cost in now.
But that's not in the 7.5.
It is not, no, yes, it is in the.
Oh, I'm sorry. You're saying it's not in the 60, whatever that is.
Correct.
So there's a number in between there where we might want to add on cooling somewhere down the road.
If you, yeah, $3.8 million is what the chillers, pumps, and that system is worth in the controls.
Okay.
For adding it in at a later time.
Okay. Now, I think at least that's clearer for me. I don't know if it's clearer for anybody else. So, okay, thank you for that clarification.
Okay. Then moving on, what I did was, I also had to sequence the project. If you were to move forward with the project, to give you an idea of how this project would build, what is proposed. Based on that, how would we go look at this project? And this schedule was a summary schedule. And by a summary schedule, what I mean is, in the same way our estimates are provided, we do a detail where we look at the individual items and then cost them. On the scheduling, we do the same thing. We look at the individual items and then basically put them in a format of when they can be built, when they can be designed, the state education review process. So you have an idea of how this project is going to build if it moves forward. So what we talked about is the first year of the project, we would just get out the storm system upgrades at the high school, middle school. And the reason for that is it's a quick design, it's a quick SED review. We can actually start working on that the summer of '22 if a bond passes. And that was the idea behind it. We need to basically allow the architects and engineers time to catch up and get ahead of the game so that we can move forward with the real work. Also, state ed's turnaround time right now is about 6 weeks, which turns into about 8. It's going to go back up to a 12-week period, we anticipate, based on the amount of work we have. So we had to start basically getting ahead of the game and starting letting the architects and engineers get ahead of everything so we can bid and construct it at the right time. So the phase.
Can you move on to something that's more, valuable?
Excuse me, sir. Sir.
Or engineer.
Hello, you're out of order. Will you please sit down? Please, sir, please sit down or I'll ask you to be removed. Hello? Hello, sit down please, thank you. No, it's not enough. This is a public meeting of the Board of Education. If you don't be quiet, I will have you removed. Am I clear?
Why don't you just build a new school?
That's it. One more time, you're out.
Yeah, okay.
Can we have this gentleman removed? I'm calling for a recess.
Good. I think you guys need to rethink.
I'm calling for a recess. Please cut the cameras off and let's have this gentleman removed. He can't behave. please. Hello, in the back. Guys, please. We're going to get ready to start again, but before we start, I'm going to ask, no more outbursts. If there is another outburst, I will stop the meeting again and ask for you to be removed. This is a Board of Education meeting held in public. You have a comment period on the agenda when you are allowed to comment. You do not ask questions to the presenters. That is the role of the Board of Education. You're elected officials. That's what we do here. This is held in public so that you can see what's going on. This is open government in action. If you cannot behave, you are disrupting a public meeting, and that is a crime, okay? Rather than have you arrested, we'll ask you to be removed. And another thing, there is a rule about masks in this building. You must have a mask on. Masks are available at the desk outside. If you do not put a mask on, I am also going to ask that anyone without a mask be removed from the room. Okay? Those are the rules. So, anybody who doesn't have a mask, I'm going to give you 2 minutes. Go out, get one, put one on. Otherwise, please leave. Yeah, go ahead.
Just, the comment was made that, the argument was made, why don't you do this on your own time? I think there's some misconceptions about what this meeting is. These board meetings are not public forums or hearings. We have specific public forums and hearings that are part of the process when we get to that point in the process. But this is our time. By law, this board may not meet in private, except to discuss very specific things like contracts, personnel issues, individual issues. So this is our time. This is our meeting where we are going to discuss the business of the school, but by law, the public is entitled to know everything we're doing, except for those things that are deemed by law, about 9 specific things that are confidential. So while I appreciate the fact that it stinks to have to sit here and listen to something that you may not care about when you're here to talk about something else, the fact remains, this is our opportunity to have that discussion with the board. And this is our time, and you're invited to view us, to understand what we're doing, to make sure that we're doing what you want. But the comment period, as Vito pointed out, is very specifically during a public meeting, at the very specific times, at the beginning about agenda items, at the end about non-agenda items, and then later on when we are ready to reach out to the public for their opinions outside of public comment, we'll have hearings to discuss that further. So we're not trying to be disrespectful and tell you we don't want to hear from you. We do want to hear from you. I think it's wonderful to see a full board, a full room of people in the audience to see what's going on. Because, for years I've been on this board. This is my 8th year. And I can tell you how many meetings I've been at where there's been nobody in the audience. And we're doing things, and people have no idea what's going on, and then something comes up, and they say, well, the board is being non-transparent, the board is doing this and that and the other thing. No, we are transparent. We have to meet by law at every meeting in public. But the conversation portion is for forums and for hearings, and we'll get to that point. So I appreciate your patience, I appreciate your understanding, but we have to understand what the scope of the project construction will be, because we do need to keep this running, and this is our business. So I hope you understand that. So I appreciate that.
Thank you, Judah. All right, thank you. All right, now that we're all, everybody's calm, everybody's under control, everyone has their masks on, let's proceed and continue with the presentation and questions.
All right, let me back up with one thing, and then let me explain what this type of information is used for at this point in the project. And that there's 2 things that you always ask. One is, how much does the project cost, and what is the timeline of the project? I need to do this type of work, schedule and sequence the project out, to one, figure out the escalation that needs to be built into the project so that we can come up with a realistic cost of where it's going to be when it gets built. The project, if started, if you voted on it in February and it approved and moved forward, will start in construction in next summer, but it doesn't complete until September of 2027. So basically, to look at a project, you have to know that we're going to be going through the schools. It's a lot of work, it's a lot of detail, and you're operating schools at the same time. So part of our job is we have to understand the scope and how we're gonna build this project while you operate a school district. Because you're not emptying the buildings to basically have us working. So we have to figure out how to get in and around that. That's what this does. It starts to give my team some clarity on how is this project going to build and why. And this project basically moves through on multiple phases. It has a 5-phase. We start with the high school. The storm drainage starts out the project. In phase 2, we start with the high school and middle school and the other schools, the other 3 buildings, as far as the safety and security, because that was one of the high priority items that you were voting on from before. So we moved that up to an early phase, so looking to complete that work in phase 2. You know, and basically phase 2 is basically building it in the year 2023. Phase 3, we needed the time to let the engineers and architects get through the buildings so we could design the mechanical systems. So they could design the mechanical systems and allow us enough time. And we start spacing out the design and the review time to give us enough time to buy. Because in this current market, one of our problems is not actually getting the work done, it's actually getting the materials on site. So we have to factor that into our schedules and our sequencing now to make sure that we can actually get the material when we need it. So, you know, there's a very short time periods that we can work on the building. So as we move into phase 3, we're really working on a lot of the infrastructure and the ventilation systems that go through the high school and the middle school. Then in phase 4, which happens in 2026, really, construction completed in from 2025 to 6, is really working on Ann Hutch and the high school. The high school bathrooms, the accessibility portion, because the amount of work wasn't completed there. And then phase 5 goes into Waverly, Greenville, and the bathrooms at the middle schools. Now, you might ask, why didn't I start at the elementary schools and move to the high schools? And the reason for that is we're trying to basically minimize the disruption with the students. So we work to the upper grades first and work our way backwards through the district. So that's the basic idea. We looked at the schedule to analyze it, to basically figure out a sequencing that would make sense and be able to meet your needs while we're working in our project building.
The other important part of this slide is that this actually informs your Lisa about borrowing and when money is borrowed and when it is spent. So this is part of the process in order to actually provide real numbers to you moving forward. Timeline. So let's see, we started this back specifically related to this project. We've been, it's developed over the course of several years from 2018. We started meeting again regularly in August of 2021. We are in October at the 23rd board meeting. 26th. We are looking for a, this is really we have, let's see, here. So from October through November, we are going to be doing scope refinement, budget refinement, and tax impact. And then at the end of November, there would be a Board of Education meeting. Continuing to move ahead to a December meeting where the board would adopt the resolution and the secret resolution for an anticipated vote in February. And between December and February, we would have a pretty intensive public informational period with forums and tours of the buildings.
leading to a bond vote in February. That's the plan, correct?
Yes, yes, finalized with that. February, we have February 7th or the 15th as a referendum date.
Okay. Questions from the board? Anybody have any, because we did discuss this at our last meeting, they've made some adjustments based on our input. Anybody have any further questions? I mean, I have a few, but I'm deferring first here.
It was clear. I mean, there was lots of information that was clarified this time around, so I thought it was great to hear this again. It was very helpful to be armed with the information and clarity. Appreciate it.
Cheryl, anything more further?
No, I echo Chris's comments. Thank you.
Good.
If it's all right, I think there were a couple points that were made at the last meeting that I think are worth reiterating today, just because, you know, you could have some people in the audience who are interested. Can you go back to the timeline real quick, just to clarify? To the project timeline. So the vision is that we're going through the 2027. This is basically a 5-year project. The bond is not going to be coming out of our, $72 million or whatever exactly was, presumably on day one. It's over a time period. And I know that we're going to have those breakdowns of the rollout.
I have a couple of slides if you want me to go over them. I just wanted you to ask what questions.
I didn't know I was jumping
I just have a few quick slides that kind of show that I'm not going.
Okay, good. Then if we cover that later, I'm fine.
Yeah.
Chrissy, Donna? Okay, my questions. The chart that you had up with the square footage of how old the buildings were, over 50, and you have a line item in here for asbestos removal, which to me looks like a pretty big number. But, I've been on the board a long time, and every year Lisa comes to us, we need to spend $100,000 to abate asbestos. We need to remove flooring in 6 classrooms. We need to remove flooring. If we're done with this bond, are we going to be able to say, all the asbestos is gone from all the flooring, we're never going to have to abate another floor? Or is this just, I want to see something that shows me, we got a $500,000 square foot. How many square feet still have asbestos flooring when we're done? Because, you know what, if you tell me it's 50,000, then I'm going to say, put the 50,000 in there, because I don't want to deal with it anymore as a board member, you know what I'm saying? So I know you have that, and I know you're not prepared to answer it now, but I think it's something that I would like to see, and I'm sure the rest of the board would like to see as well. If we're still going to have asbestos floors to remove, I think they should all be in here. And let's get done with this, so Lisa doesn't have to ask us every year for money. And she's not here right now. Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry, Lisa, you were like that. But you follow my question there? Okay, good. I don't have any further questions, so I guess we're done with this item? Yes? Lisa? Oh, I'm sorry, you have slides.
Thank you very much. Hopefully everyone can hear me okay. So I just want to reiterate that these are very preliminary numbers. Interest rates are estimated, aid rates are estimated, the cash flow is estimated at this point, but I know you all wanted to see approximately. So that's where we are with this. This is absolutely subject to change. So this is from 2022, the current year we're in, out through 2043. The blue bars represent our current local share of debt. What that means is that is our current debt that is on the books, net of state building aid that we receive. So that is the net amount that the taxpayers pay for our current debt. The orange pieces, the orange bars there, are currently what we spend on our energy performance contract. We did that, I don't know, maybe 8 or 10 years back. We went into an energy performance contract. We got some new boilers down at Greenvale. We got some new lighting fixtures throughout the district. That expires in 2028. The gray bars are, again, an estimate of what the new debt local share would be. That's the bond cost minus the state aid that we're projecting we would get on this project. So you can see at least up until about 2028, it's pretty flat. We're not really taking on new debt until 2028, or I should say the impact of new debt. Next slide. So in order to estimate the tax rate, I needed to kind of look at 1 year in isolation, right? So I wanted to start with where we are now at approximately $3.6 or $3.5 million in net impact debt. And I went to the highest point that will ever be in 2034. That's about a $2.6 million difference in debt. And then what I did was, and obviously we're not going to feel that increase all in 1 year, but just to kind of get a sense of how much we're talking about. So I started with our tax rate for this year because that's the best, most current information that we have. So for 21, 22, I kept our assessed values flat at a little over $50 million. I increased our tax levy by the $2.6 million to get a new tax rate. The tax levy, that would equate to a tax levy increase of 3.34%. The tax rate would be about 3.35%. And then I did some calculations to show the various ranges based on the assessed value of homes, right? So the average home in Eastchester is about an $8,900 assessed value. So the projected total increase for this project only would be $463 over multiple years, right? So it's not, you won't feel it all in 1 year, you'll feel it over multiple years as we get to 2034. So then you can see based on, you know, if your assessed value is a little bit less or a little bit higher, that's approximately. Again, this does not include any STAR exemption benefits, and this assumes no change in total assessed value, which we all know total assessed value will change. And again, this does not include any changes to the regular budget number. This is just the impact of doing this project. So that's where we stand preliminarily. Again, this is also, I should mention, for the full project. The air cooling piece of it is approximately 10%. Ironically, it just kind of works out that way. So if you want to think about what this would cost without the cooling alternate, just take 90% of it. And that I think will get us close enough. So again, I just want to reiterate, these are all subject to change, but this is just to kind of give you an idea. Any questions on that?
The 463, that's compared to, is it 2021 or 2022?
This current year.
So in the prior slide, it looked like the debt service was going down. So do you have the amount, you know, let's say in 2028, how much more per average house it would be?
In 2028?
But that was the highest year, right?
2034 was the highest year.
Whatever the 2.6 million was based off of, I'm just trying to see, because this is the change from now, but if we did nothing, you know, we would be going down, right?
Right,
So I'm just trying to figure out what the change would be at kind of,
It would be
around
going
the
down.
peak, around the peak years.
Right, so if you just eliminated the grays completely, right, I mean, your tax rate would go down as debt rolls off, right? So, I mean, it's just difficult to estimate the fluctuations down and then the fluctuations up from year to year when you don't know what your set values are going to be in that year and you don't know, you know, some of the other factors involved here. So I was just trying to get a sense of where we are now and where we would be at the most kind of debt-heavy year to see what the overall impact was. As we move forward with this, if we are going to move forward with this and we kind of, you know, drill down on some of these things, we can get much more detailed and we can get much more, whatever information you require, we can get much more detailed schedules or different iterations of it, whatever you feel comfortable with.
All right, thanks.
Anybody else first? No? Okay. So, if I read the numbers behind this and this, basically you're saying that the average house from now till then, till the high point, is going to go up about, I'll call it $500 instead of $460, okay? $463, just for argument's sake, call it $500, and it's about 5 years. So in my mind, each year, like the first year, it would go up 100, the second year would go up another 100, the next year would go up another 100. So by the time you get to the fifth, I'm straight lining everything, okay? By the time you get to the fifth year, you're at the high point, but you've gone up in chunks of $100 a year.
It's an incremental increase.
To people's taxes, okay? As opposed to, in the third year, actually going down instead of going up. Because we have some debt rolling off, correct?
Well, I mean, the tax rate would actually, if we don't add any other debt for any other reason, the tax rate in 2023 would go down slightly as a result of this. And 24 will go down even more. So yes, going from the lowest point to the highest point would be more.
I understand that.
But from where we are right now, it's.
Is there any way that, I know the answer to this, but I want to ask it anyway. Is there any way that you can tax it the same rate as 22 and 23 to keep that up so that the increases and put it into a reserve?
I never thought I'd hear you say that. We could always tax more. But
No. Keep the debt level above 3 million so that we don't drop it down and then have to raise it so much in the subsequent years.
So there are things that we can do so that to stabilize the tax rate.
That's
we
where
can
I'm-
talk about
that's
this
where I'm
as we get
going.
into budgets.
All right, that's something we have to, all of us have to remember. Okay, can't lose sight of that. All right, any other questions on this?
So you need, if we do that, we need to make that sure, right? We need to make sure that, because I know with capital reserves, you need special.
It would be some type of a reserve, you don't.
Right, we need votes in that.
Yeah.
I understand that.
So we don't want to lock ourselves in a situation where people set up these.
I understand that. And that's a taxpayer decision, not our decision.
That's true.
Okay. I'm okay. Everybody else okay? Any other questions here? No? Yes? Okay. All right, thank you all. That was very informative. And you're going to give us copies on the new presentation, correct?
Yeah, you should have it already, Lisa has it.
Yeah, we'll actually put it up on the website in case people want to look at it.
Okay, let's go to the, back to the agenda now.
I'm still, just got a couple slides of general updates for the superintendent's report. There were 3 things, right? First was recognition, second was capital project, and third is some general updates. I just want to make everybody aware that we've been monitoring our COVID data, and as you received a report at our last board meeting 2 weeks ago, it showed that left column through October 8th, the number of students who were absent or sent home with COVID symptoms. That is important to remember. This is people who didn't come to school, they called in sick, right? Or students who were sent home. They're all included in that 320. Of those who tested positive, of those students, 20 of them tested positive. That was over about a 5-week period. And of those symptomatic, how many had siblings in other buildings? 103. And then what was the number of siblings who became positive? There were only 2. And based on that data, we made a decision to make a change to the way that we handle the situation with regard to siblings. So if a student has COVID symptoms, previously we were excluding their siblings from coming to school until we could verify whether their sibling had COVID. We looked at the data, we realized that may not be helping us because very few of them ended up getting positive. So we tracked the data for 2 more weeks. We will continue to track it. The 2-week tracking was through the 22nd last Friday. That is the blue column. 128 students were sent home or were ill with COVID-type symptoms. 2 of those tested positive, 42 had SIBs, and no siblings became positive. So the cumulative totals are on the right. I thought you should see that data. It's reinforcing. So far, we're seeing a good positive trend. Also wanted to just reiterate, because we talked about this last week and we made one small change. We have federal funds that are available to help with COVID. These are our American Rescue and Recovery Funds. That application is due at the end of this month. And we are looking at, we have hired an academic intervention support person, teaching assistant at Waverly. We are holding a chunk of that money available for teaching And I'll explain that in just a moment. That's the second item, 227. Have air purifiers in areas where we do not have appropriate ventilation. Tents, of course, which are outside. Monitors and supervision support, which helps increase our distance and keep kids from getting quarantined. A 1.0 floating nurse that is being hired now because our nurses are really they're struggling right now with the caseload that they have around COVID. Teacher professional development at $50,000, that's just a starting point. We're doing a lot of work with response to intervention and multi-tiered systems of support training. And as part of that work, we understand that students will have to make up some ground depending on the assessment data we have. So we're investing in the assessment data, specialized assessment data, and training for our teachers over a multi-year period to make sure that they're able to deliver the services our students need in the classroom or in an intervention setting. So then the last item, which is a new item, which I'm sorry the slide is sort of cutting off there, is a COVID rapid PCR allocation of $50,000. And I'll explain that in just a moment. But before I do, I want to talk a little bit about the large number of 2.5 FTE for K-5 teaching. Right now, when a student is quarantined, and the number of students that are quarantined goes up and down based on circumstances. A couple weeks ago, we didn't have any students quarantined. That teacher was available to enrich, to support, to give all kinds of help to students if they were quarantined, but also could help students who need support in the school, COVID-related support. We don't know heading into the wintertime whether our numbers will go up or down in terms of students quarantined. Just over the weekend, we had 14 students quarantined in one school over the weekend, and we had 4 or 5 at another school. So our numbers went up. Each of those students has to have services delivered directly to them, virtually, by a certified qualified teacher who is special education certified and regular education certified. We have someone doing that work and doing it very well. We've hired one. But we don't know what the future will hold, and this money can stretch over many years. We want to make sure that whatever our students need, we have that money in advance to be able to meet their needs. That doesn't mean that we won't be able to reallocate these funds because they are somewhat fungible. We'll be able to move them from one account to another if we need more money in the PD development line to equip our teachers to be able to help accelerate learning for all of our students. So we feel good about this plan because at all costs, we must make sure that we can service students who are quarantined and cannot access school. You've got to have access to high quality curriculum, high quality education, and our teachers, we have teachers in place to do that, and if we need to expand, we need to expand. That's why we've kept the money there. We don't know what that's going to bring, and we have the money, the ability to move those funds around if we need to do that. So I wanted you to see that and be aware that this is where the allocation is going. And one more point, and then I'm going to conclude the update. 2 more points real quickly. I want to remind everybody that strategic planning in this district is in full swing. This is a multi-month process. It will conclude in January. This board is going to get a report, second meeting in January, laying out the outcomes of the strategic planning process, which has engaged dozens of people in the district, all across the district, professionally facilitated. And right now we have a profile of our graduate that we're looking at, and this is the draft of what we want our graduates to look like. When they come to us at kindergarten, and then they leave us at 12th grade, we want them to be able to be looking like this. We want them to have these skills in addition to their academic core knowledge. We want them to be problem-solving complex issues. They better be great communicators. They're going to be critical, analytical, interconnected thinkers. They're going to be able to self-manage. They're going to be able to engage in civic discourse and participate in this democracy effectively. We want them to have dispositions of persistence, fortitude, empathy, integrity. We want them to have a mindset of growth, and we want them to have a healthy dose of creativity and imagination. We can do all these things for our graduates. By the end of their time here with us, we will have prepared them well for their future. And this is just, an overview of what we want. How we get there has to be organized and strategized, and that's the part that's coming next. Right now we're assessing the capacity in our systems, not just our classrooms, but our entire system. How well are we prepared to begin to deliver this? That's what we're finding out now. We're collecting data. We have teams of people collecting data to figure that out, and we'll report that out to this board. So they will have not only some of these broad outcomes, but a sense of the strategies that we're going to need to get there over a period of 5, 6, 8 years in order to make this, have our students have these skills in place. And lastly, I just want to let everybody know we've had our 4th meeting of our DEI task force of 6. I want to remind everybody the purpose of the DEI task force was to do what the state asked us to do. To take a look at the culturally responsive sustaining education framework that they put out. They directed all districts to take a look at it. That's what we've done, taking a look at it. We put together a cross-sectional committee of 28 people. We're looking at this document and have spent now 4 meetings doing it. On our website, under the academic information section, you'll find everything that we've discussed, who's on the committee, how they were selected, what they're studying, what the PowerPoints are, what the agendas are. We're making it as open and transparent as we possibly can. We want everybody to know that recommendations are coming to this board in the first meeting in January around these 3 areas. Right now, for the next 2 meetings, all the group is doing is sitting down in groups of 3 different groups of about 8 people, 8 or 9 people, and one group is working on bringing. So what should happen around for Eastchester? What makes sense for us around what this document says for a welcoming and affirming environment? What should we be thinking about? How about for inclusive curriculum and assessment? What might we be thinking about in the future? What recommendations might we make for this Board of Education and this administration? And third, on high expectations and rigorous instruction. What might Eastchester be thinking about? What's important to us? We are focusing in this group, and I want to really drive this home, on what brings us together. There's a lot of diverse opinions on this committee, and some of you are on that committee. Some of you are on that committee. There's a lot of diverse opinion, and that's the way it's supposed to be. But in the end, we're in alignment that we're going to find the stuff that we agree on, that we think we can work together on. We're going to start there, and those are the kind of recommendations we're going to bring. We're not interested in all kinds of division. We're interested in bringing people together around things that this community thinks are important. Those 3 areas come right out of the state document. They've asked us to look at them, and that's what we're going to do. We're going to look at those and say to ourselves, Eastchester, what should we do in these areas? And when we get those recommendations, we'll have an opportunity to consider them. That's what we've been asked to do by the state. That's what we're doing. And we'll be done at the end of December. Have recommendations for you in January. Just 2 more meetings. We're almost finished. The committee's just kind of working on some final recommendations for you. And that's all I have for my update. I know this was a very lengthy update for you. I appreciate everyone's patience. These are things that we've committed to, and we've been working on for a long time, and we wanted to make sure we gave adequate time. Board members, administrators on the team here, are there any questions that I can answer for you? Anybody? Yes?
This is about the COVID sort of proposal, and I appreciate the flexibility and the need for flexibility, because you just don't know what you'll need, and the biggest chunk of that money is going toward instruction. So I just wanted to make sure, and I know you're thinking about this, but make sure we're thinking about investments in long-term, so the professional development, long-term teaching staff. And I also just want to make sure, since it is being used over a number of years, that we are going to look really carefully this year at how the students are doing after the last 18 months of strangeness in education, at the higher levels and the more rigorous coursework that they're facing in the high school and say, or middle school. What are some of the kinds of, what's happening with students in honors courses? How are they doing? Are they hanging in there? Are we seeing a lot of attrition? Is there a way that we can support those students? How much does the attrition we might be seeing out of honors courses this year compared to past years? All those kinds of questions, because I think students at all levels and at all grades might be struggling. So that might be another place where we could think about flexibility, and I wanted to say that. And I also wanted to say, thinking about our special education population, we want to continue to monitor them as well and make sure that we're supporting that population. And I know that there are funds targeted for special education, but in general, you know, I just wanted to
Yes.
say publicly that those sorts of, so much to think about right now across the district and so many ways to spend those funds, but we do have targeted populations, and I know that we're thinking quite a bit about second language learners, and we've already applied money toward that in the budget for this year, so we need to continue to be thinking about all the populations at the district, and thank you for the work that the team's put in on that so far.
Thank you. And you're echoing what we heard from our, our group of stakeholders in the committee. You're echoing the thoughts. Sustainability tied into a long-term strategy. Don't just put it into, short-term staff that'll be there for a year or two. Put it into long-term strategy. And it does tie in very well to our second strategic goal, or a goal that we've been working on around multi-tiered systems of support, which we've started in the early grades, but you've really highlighted the fact that work is K-12 work and needs to go on at all levels. And Mr. Wynn and I have been talking extensively about this. Dr. Urso and I have been talking extensively about this as well. And, Mr. Wynn, I don't know if you want to comment on how this fits into strategy, but it clearly does, right? So this fits right into our strategy that we've had right along. And I agree with your comments, and they are clearly the comments that we heard from our families in this process. And even as recently as last night at the PTA meeting, reiterating that strongly. We hear them, we agree with them, and we have a lot of intent to actually, continue that, but it's already underway. And I appreciate you sharing some of the data points we can look at in terms of attrition. I think those would be great places to start. Yes?
Sorry, I just wanted to also add to Cheryl's list that we discussed is to also bring, I think, more awareness to our BOCES program, our wonderful BOCES program that we have and that we offer to all students, and to, I think, really bring some awareness to the freshman and sophomore students that is an alternative and an option, and I don't think we do enough of that. So I would love to see some dollars earmarked toward doing more exposure to those programs too.
Okay, thank you for that.
Excuse me, just one more thing. I just wanted to follow up about the high school lockers.
Yes.
Any update?
Lockers will be open as soon as the lockers arrive. We expect them any time. We're just waiting for them to arrive.
Okay.
We don't have locks. We like to have locks that we have a key that will open in the back so that we have access to them without having to cut them. If you have, and I have spoken with the high school principal, if we have a student with a medical need or a special accommodation that needs a locker sooner, that can be done. So they just need to approach the administration for that, and there's no problem there. We have accommodations we can make, but in terms of issuing them to everyone and opening them up, we have to wait for hundreds of locks to arrive, and we're anticipating them very quickly, very shortly.
Okay. I know that there are a lot of parents who it's really negatively impacting, and students as well. I know there's a lot of parents who are leaving work to meet their children and dismissal to hand them their sports equipment, or driving their kids to school because they can't carry two different bags. So I was wondering, in the meantime, while we're still waiting for the locks, I don't know if there's some sort of problem with delivery or lock shortage. I know there's a lot of shortages everywhere. Perhaps we could let students know that maybe they could request a locker and bring their own lock for the time being.
Well, I would recommend that anybody who has a specific need and really wants to advocate for that, just work with the principal and ask for that accommodation. I've talked with the principal recently, and if accommodation is needed, it can be made. So that's the best way to do it. Just what do you need? Work with that administration. The administration has agreed to work with individual families on anything that is needed that way. So we can accommodate those things. If there are hardships or medical needs, absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Okay, anybody else? Okay. Oh, John, sorry.
I just wanted to touch briefly on the 14-student quarantine situation. I understand this was a result of one student that tested positive. And I think, a number of months ago, we had a situation, it was at Greenvale, where 5 or 6 students were quarantined due to one student testing positive. And at that time, I thought that was, unacceptably high number. So I don't want to, place blame or point fingers about this, but do we have, is there some sort of process that we could go through? Would if you have, I understand if somebody tests positive, that, under the laws currently, there's not much we can do to stop maybe 1 or 2 quarantines, but if we have more than, say, 5 kids getting quarantined from a single positive case, I think there should be some sort of post-mortem process and some accountability where you go through, with the principal of the school and the nurse and really sit down and say, how could, because 14 students from one is, and everybody's wearing masks, we're doing everything that we can. That shouldn't be happening. So I think you really need to sit down and debrief, and there should be a process. If you're above a certain threshold, there has to be some accountability and some recommendations about changes that can be made to prevent that from happening.
We certainly can and do. And let me just give you a little sample of how this came down. And we just use this little debrief on this particular process. This all happened on the weekend, right? We found this out on the weekend. So as soon as we get this information, principal and Dr. Urso, the nurses, they kind of spring into action to try to figure out, who was where, right? So, I think this might have started Friday, but by the time I found out about it, it was over the weekend. Sometimes it happens you find out about it over the weekend, sometimes it happens on a Thursday or a Friday. So, in speaking with the principal, I learned that because of the 3-foot rule that you have, anytime you have even a student with masks that's under 3 feet, there were enough indications in the classroom, because it's a first grade classroom, which is 600 square feet, smaller. There were a number of people around that student who would be quarantined around 15 minutes. Then you had the same student in a smaller office space around other students, affected others. And then you had outdoor time, which really boggles my mind. I've got to agree. The Westchester County Department of Health is saying even outdoors, when you're that close without a mask, even though you're outdoors, you've got to be quarantined. So we've challenged, we looked at all that and asked questions. And started out what might be a higher number, but you have to actually backtrack the student through the whole day and figure out who were they around. And so 14 is a lot. I agree with you. So we'll continue to look at that. As a result of situations like that, we find out that we can make an incremental adjustment we hadn't thought of earlier. Sometimes we can challenge if the timing is right. We can get a hold of Westchester County Health. We can advocate and say, look, they were outside. Come on, So there are things we can do. It doesn't just kind of go on blindly. We do some cross-checking, and we will consult with a number of folks. Dr. Urso, our medical director, if available, and myself, and we'll go through that. So yes, it can and should happen. It is a lot. It is a large number. So I agree with you. I think that we continue to. We always look at these. We spend a lot of time on before, during, and after, and we will continue to look after with this one. So there's one thing I did not mention that I think is really important. It was at the bottom of my slide, and I got sidetracked. I apologize. The COVID-19 rapid PCR testing program. I have to thank our team for looking into this, and I have to thank our board for raising the question. At our last board meeting, you looked at that 320 student number, and you said, my gosh, that's a lot of kids, even if they're out for a couple days. What can we do to keep them in? Right? What can we do to get testing for them? So our team went to work and got in touch with a local provider. We have that agreement on consent tonight for you. What that agreement would allow us to do is, a local provider, so let's say a student comes to school, they have symptoms of COVID. They've got to go home and get tested. Under normal circumstances, that might take 2-3 days. They've got to go to the doctor, make an appointment, take the test. It's not a rapid PCR. It would take 2 or 3 days. They can still be out 2, 3, 4 days. What this will allow them to do is go to a local provider, take the test, rapid PCR within 15 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour. They're going to know the results and be able to have an opportunity, if they're negative, to come right on back. They'll bill insurance, and if the insurance doesn't cover it, we'll use these federal funds to cover the cost of that test. That's going to help a lot of students who might be out for a day or two, not be out for a day or two. It's going to get at that number. And I have to thank our team Lisa Sanfilippo, Marie Urso, really looking hard at this, working with our medical director to figure out a way to do this, looking and talking to every resource to try to figure out how we can do this. Excited about it. I think it's a big key.
Good. That's actually great news.
Yes, great news.
That's the best news tonight.
Again, it's an example of really good problem solving among this team. Looking at the data, finding a problem, asking us to come back with a solution, bringing you a solution. Can't always work like that, but in this case it did. And federal funds came in really handy to be able to do this. So we're pretty excited about it. We should be able to let families know about this as soon as you approve it tonight, and then hopefully the provider has the tests in stock and is able to move.
Okay, great.
Okay?
Anybody? Okay. Next item on the agenda is board meeting times and formats. We're going to talk about this. Questions have come up. We start our meetings normally at 8 o'clock. Sometimes we move them to 7:30. People get confused. We want to talk about making them consistent. I think, Ron, we had a recommendation that we, okay, there we go. Who put that up?
I think it just
Scott?
it goes to the machine.
All right. Maybe it's on autopilot. I don't know.
Someone did probably.
Whoever's doing it, keep doing it.
I was.
Oh, that's not the times, I'm sorry. All right, my mistake. So, the proposal at hand right now for discussion is, do we change the Board of Ed meetings to 7:30 all the time, the public meetings now, discussion meetings and regular meetings? And we were having them at 8 o'clock whenever we had a committee meeting at 7 o'clock to allow an hour for the committee. Because some people can't get here at 6:30 for a committee meeting. The recommendation is to make the public meetings all 7:30 starts, okay? And then each committee can decide whether they want to have their meeting an hour before the public meeting, if they can do it. And if they can't, just to have it on another night. Unfortunately, it becomes another night out for those committee members. But what it also does is get you home a half hour earlier on the public meeting. So I'm just throwing that out. What do you guys think about that as a possibility? And we can start here unless someone wants to raise their hand. Jackie,
I like earlier. It's fine for me.
you're okay starting at 7:30 all the time?
Okay, so we don't have earlier, yeah.
Well, keep in mind, if you have a committee and your committee can meet at 6:30, you do it. And if you can't, you do it on another night. Okay? Chris, are you okay with that?
I'm good with whatever. Whatever makes sense. I'm personal.
Cheryl, what about you?
I'm fine with starting at 7:30. I think there will be times when the committee, I work in, I have a commute, so there might be times that, and so I feel bad for others that would have to be on another night, and it might not always be possible, depending on the time of year and the day, for me to be home for a 6:30 meeting. I also just want to say, we want to continue to make sure the meetings are accessible for the public, and so some may prefer 7:30, some may prefer 8, but as long as it's a time that people can have dinner at home with their families and come out to the public meeting and it remains as accessible as possible, then I think that's also a consideration. And
I guess we'll hear during comments on that, so. Good.
Yeah, I'm okay with 7:30.
Okay. Chrissy?
I'm fine, 7:30, I just can't do that for the next meeting, November 9th, because I have a commitment, but after that, I'm fine with 7:30.
Good. John?
And I'm indifferent between 7:30 and 8.
I didn't hear you.
Said I'm indifferent between 7:30 and 8.
Okay. And Steve's not here tonight. For anybody who was expecting him, he called me, broke his glasses, can't see without his glasses, so he's out getting his glasses fixed, so we'll assume he's a yes. So for now, going forward, all our meetings will be 7:30, unless something occurs, we're flexible, we can always change them again.
We'd like to begin that in 2 more meetings because of Chris's situation.
You want to do the next one at 8? Does that work for you?
Yes, please.
Okay, so we'll do the next one at 8, then subsequent to that, we'll make them all 7:30.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, I missed the fact that it was just a one meeting, so that's cool.
Thank you.
All right, so that discussion's over.
There was one more component to that about streaming too. Did you want to
Oh, yeah, well, we will be streaming our discussion meetings and our regular meetings going forward. So, in an attempt to be more open and make it available for those people who might not be able to make it at 7:30, to Cheryl's point, so. All right? All right, let's move on to the next thing. Now we're up to the consent agenda. We're gonna really blow past this one. The consent agenda is the Board of Education votes on all the items in front of it in one motion, so we don't have to read each resolution. If anyone on the board wants to remove an item from the consent agenda or talk about it separately, we can, or vote about it separately. So tonight's consent agenda includes the approval of our minutes on September 28th, the approval of our minutes on October 7th, the approval of our minutes on October 12th, approval of our personnel agenda per the attached, the approval of the stipulation of settlement, approval of the Committee on Special Education, the Spark agreement, what else? Substitute nursing services agreement, and architect agreement, licensing agreement, treasurer's report, change orders, approval of the donation, and our medical services agreement. Okay? And we'll leave the adult health separately. So, Judy, would you like to move the consent agenda?
Sure, I'll move a resolution that the Board of Education approve the consent agenda, which includes, as you know, stated items 9 and 1 through 3, the minutes, personal agenda item 10, meeting of preschool special education and special education organizations, item number 11, the business office recommendation, item number 12, and the other business item, item number 13.
Okay. Chrissy, you want to second that? Sure. Nobody wants anything removed, correct? All in favor? Aye, good, 7-0. All right, next item is the district-wide health and safety committee, and we have a slight change to that because we have some names that we've added to that. So why don't we mention that before we make the motion for it? So, Judy, you have the names, correct?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Who does? Oh, Jonah does, okay. Jonah, why don't you make the motion with the modified names, the additional names?
Sure, and before I make the motion, I just wanted to let people know that we can always add people to this committee, so if anybody is interested in being on the Health and Safety Committee, reach out to Rob Glass. Reach out to Rob Glass. This is a committee that assists in the investigation and disposition of health and safety related complaints. So if anybody's interested in being on that committee, we can add you. Please reach out to Dr. Glass. And now let it be resolved that item 1301, District-Wide Health and Safety Committee, is hereby amended by adding the following members of the Health and Safety Committee: Anna Massar, Janine Karate, Tony Racine, Laurel Gaffney, and Chrissy Gagan.
Okay, Jackie, you want to second that? Sure. Okay, any discussion on this? Okay, all in favor? 7-0. Okay. Future meeting dates? I don't see the dates here. I know we have it on the agenda, so November. Get on November 9th. You have it?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, I got it. Why don't you talk about the first three? You know, future meeting dates.
Tuesday, November 9th is a work session, Tuesday, November 23rd is a regular meeting, and Tuesday, December 14th will be our one December meeting because of holiday break. We will have to do that one.
Okay, good. Now we're up to comments from the board.
Actually,
yeah, I can put that last. You want to do comments from the public?
yeah,
Sure. Okay, we'll move comments from the board last, and we'll go to comments from the public. I will remind everyone, I'd like comments from the public for residents only first. And it's limited to 3 minutes. And if you could come up, identify yourself, your name, where you live. And there are multiple people, just form a queue.
If you haven't signed in, sign in first, please. If you haven't signed in, sign in first, please.
I signed up first.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Hi, everyone. Suzanne Johnson, 14 Innisfree Place.
Closer to the mic so that we can.
Can you hear me now?
I hear you a little better, yeah.
Okay. Suzanne Johnson, 14 Innisfree Place. Good evening, members of the board, superintendent, community members. This is for all the parents that have no idea that Eastchester has a program called Social Emotional Learning, or SEL. This program is tied to the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion program in CRT. An 11-page SEL comprehensive counseling plan was added to our district's website sometime in July 2020, drastically increasing counseling services for students K through 12. While on the surface, the plan presents a sanitized picture of teaching children compassion and responsibility. However, nowhere in this comprehensive plan does it call for parent consent for those counseling services. So now, our public schools come out of their lane of teaching academics to now addressing psychological issues without parent consent. This is what I think parents mostly expect from our schools. If a student has a fever and goes to the school nurse, the school should call the parents, and the parents will take the child to the doctor. If the student is depressed and goes to the guidance counselor, again, the school should call the parents, and the parents should decide how to handle the situation. It is not up to the guidance counselor to take it upon themselves and decide how to advise the student in personal and private matters without the prior consent of parents. It would be very easy for something like the social emotional learning to sway our innocent and impressionable children away from the values they learn at home. A program such as this violates parental rights, and this needs to be corrected. Dr. Glass and Mr. Nguyen need to clarify the SEL program to the parents and let the parents decide if they want to opt out of counseling services. Also, I want to suggest maybe to have public comment first before the agenda items, because many parents can't keep their kids waiting all night, and that's how other school boards do it in other parts of the county. Thank you.
My name is Kushbu Delani. I've spoken here before. I'm a senior at Eastchester High School. Today I want to focus on how the DEI will be affecting our students. I've spoken before about the curriculum. I just want to be a little more broad this time. The framework for the culturally responsive, sustaining education, as stated on our district website, claims that this education is, and I quote, grounded in cultural value of learning and human development in which multiple expressions of diversity, for example, race, social class, gender, language, sexual orientation, nationality, religion, and ability, are recognized and regarded as assets for teaching and learning. So all students, regardless of their achievement level, identity, or ideology, deserve an education system where they can succeed. School is the center of achievement. It's also a social setting. It's a place that we spend most of our time in, where we challenge ourselves academically, make new connections, and learn more about ourselves in the world. In a place like this, where we get our first introduction to the world beyond our homes, it is important that we learn about diverse perspectives. Diverse classrooms call for more engaged and critical students, students who can explore and find their own voices, learn to collaborate with others, and learn how to use their minds as tools to achieve anything and everything. According to the Century Foundation, diverse classrooms are beneficial to all students, including middle-class white students, because these environments promote creativity, motivation, deeper learning, critical thinking, and problem-solving skills. What defines a successful student or a successful school? Most of us would agree that a high school has succeeded when students are ready to face the world, have higher test scores, are less likely to drop out, go to college, and are secure. An integrated, critical, demanding, and responsive curriculum achieves exactly that. Now let's talk about the clear elephant in the room: race, gender, and sexuality. It is not unknown that children and teens who are seen as different can often fall victim to isolation, bullying, multiple microaggressions, and stereotyping or profiling. These differences are not negative, and in fact, most elementary level classes spend a significant amount of time discussing anti-bullying and loving one another. However, as demographics are less and less represented than one type in further education, certain biases begin to form that can lead to ignorance. These ignorance are repetitive and taught and never untaught. So it's important that by when we start allowing prejudices and stereotyping regarding student identities, we slowly destroy lives. I have a lot more stats in here, but I know I'm running out of time. I just think that these values do not seem negative to me in any way at all. The responsibility of a school and a community is to protect our students and to value their achievement in education. And there are multiple stats showing how a curriculum and a system like this is so beneficial. And we're lucky to be in an affluent neighborhood where we don't have to worry about the school to prison pipeline, but there are many ways that this will impact our neighborhood and our community. Thank you.
Before we go to the next person, I'd just like to comment back to the young lady. Why don't you take the time to take what you wrote and send it to the Board of Ed in an email? Because quite honestly, when students are reading things at the microphone through masks, I can't hear it. I really can't understand everything you're saying. If you send it to an email, it will be read, and I'd much rather hear you talking from your heart like you did at the end than reading something that's prepared.
Sorry.
Not that I don't value
no, of
that.
course. I also got very shaky, and I have a few more resources in here that I really think are going to be impactful, so I will send them all your way.
Send us the whole statement.
Okay, thank you so much.
Okay, and that goes for anybody else on the line. You know, we'd much rather hear from you and send us what you've prepared. It just will be received better. At least I know it will be by me. I don't know about everybody else. Go ahead.
Peter, we're not using the sign-up list. We just get it online.
Yeah, get online.
I think there is.
There is
No, you have to sign up. You need to sign up before people are signing up.
Hi, I'm Dennis Danher. I'm also a senior at East Chester High School. It is already known that there are multiple issues that are currently plaguing our district, such as students facing heinous acts of racism and prejudice which go unnoticed. I want to touch upon this disturbing topic because it's something that needs to be continually addressed until we can work in a collaborative effort to handle situations regarding race properly. It's clear that racial issues and tensions feverishly grow. Just last week, our black students had to overhear several white students recite the N-word through means of lyricism. When one of these students confronted the high school principal, there were zero repercussions for those who participate in the act, and there's so-called a zero tolerance policy, and this not connecting is just unacceptable. These empty promises and policies contribute to the uneasiness of minorities that are enrolled, as well as possibly making them feel as if they have little to no voice in matters that are regarding themselves. They may also believe whatever they have to bring up will be dismissed in the end. There are dozens, if not hundreds, more issues that have happened just within the last year that have not been brought up to the school. If they were, would they also be swept under the rug like most other stories? I don't mean to come across aggressive or make it seem like I'm bashing the school. I suppose the ultimate point I'm trying to make is that East Chester and its accompanying public schools are meant to be a safe space for all students and people. East Chester schools pride themselves as being a welcoming place. I believe that the DEI organization can help immensely by actually creating a safe space. The one advertised now just seems to just be a front, as unfortunate as that sounds. I'm going to conclude this as I concluded my previous speech through a question. How are students, specifically minorities, going to feel safe in a place where there is little to nothing that is done when something is hurtful, traumatizing, and insensitive is done against them? How can we create that safer environment that is truly inclusive of them?
Hello, my name is Amukta, and I'm a rising senior at EHS, and I want to thank the board for letting me speak today. So, there has been an issue of slurs being used to target certain students, not only at school, but especially at school events outside of school. and the prevalence of this language is concerning. So the students know these words, I believe these students know these words are offensive, but they aren't able to understand just how demeaning this language really is. And I also believe they use these slurs out of ignorance rather than malice, but they don't understand the true weight of their words, nor the painful history behind this language that was once used and is still used to dehumanize its victims. Whether it be the DEI task force or some other means, the social awareness that our students have to understand their actions have consequences needs to be prioritized in a way that enables them to learn about these other perspectives rather than simply tells them what they should and should not do. Not only does this create a more accepting school environment, but it equips our students with the tools they need to be complex thinkers and problem solvers. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Isabel Pregiato. I am a senior at East Chester High School. I'm going to kind of emphasize what Dennis and Amukta said and speak further into language. There are approximately 476 words in the English language, but today I'm going to be talking about 2 of them specifically. Not only are these words used far too often in the vocabulary of students at EHS, but they are also classified as slurs defined by Merriam-Webster as an insulting or disparaging remark or innuendo. These slurs are the N-word and the F-slur. Words can carry an immense amount of weight that many students at EHS don't seem to understand. Reclamation is not a reason to bring a word back into everyday vocabulary, and words that are reclaimed by a specific community should only be used by that community. The history of the N-word makes it extremely disrespectful for white people to say it without remorse for the many, many black people who were brutally murdered by white Americans and are still unfortunately being murdered today. At EHS, I have heard numerous students say the N-word and unfortunately was recently told that a black student was called the N-word with a hard R by a white student. At this year's homecoming football game, a group of students brought a speaker and played music containing the N-word, which I personally witnessed multiple white students singing along to. This is unacceptable. Now I'd like to move on to the F-slur. The F-slur is a word that has been used against the LGBTQ+ community, specifically the gay community, since the early 20th century. While this word isn't being reclaimed in the same way the N-word has been reclaimed, I still hear students call their friends and LGBTQ+ students the F-slur. Last year, I was called the F-slur by a student. You would think they were younger and didn't understand how offensive this slur is, but no, they were a senior and I was a junior. I had to explain to this student, who was an entire year older than me and about to go off into the world to college, how disrespectful it is to use the F-slur and ask them to refrain from using this word in the future. That isn't my job. It should be the parents and the teachers teaching young, impressionable teenagers what words to use and what words not to use. The DEI task force is here to facilitate discussions and hopefully in the future, change the curriculum in a way that will lead students to learn and actually understand why these words cannot be said in a derogatory and hateful way under any circumstances. Without the DEI, students will continue using slurs and other derogatory remarks in their everyday vocabulary at the expense of others who identify with the community being targeted. As I said earlier, there are 171,476 words in the English language. Why can't we just stop using these 2? Thank you.
My name is Carmelina Estello. I'm an East Chester resident and I come to these board meetings and I hear periodically the board members mention how they're not medical professionals and it's hard to make decisions for the medical. It's hard to make decisions.
That too, but closer.
Okay, it's hard to make medical decisions for the community, and I empathize with that, but I'm here as a medical professional to let you know you don't need to be a medical professional to figure this out. It's actually quite simple, being made very complicated. You're focusing on cases, and you continue to focus on cases which in medicine don't hold any weight. It's the mortality and hospitalization rate, which has always been 0% in children, globally, nationally, locally. From the deadliest of all strains back in March of 2020, to the least dangerous, the Delta now. The mortality rate has still been 0%. I want to reference the influenza, just to use it as, as a reference. the H1N1 killed 1,153 children in 12 months. COVID has unfortunately claimed the lives of 443 children in 20 months, almost double the time. Yet during flu season, we never masked our kids, we never social distanced them, we never tested them, we never closed schools during flu season, and we never quarantined them. Yet, as a community, we have survived. Let's talk about the measures, because we continue to subject our children to these measures that really are not that effective as we think they are. If you were to, first of all, if there is a break in the seal, 3.2% break in the seal of a mask, the effectiveness of that mask goes down to 0%. That's why 95s in the medical community are fitted. If there's more than 2% adjustment in the wearing of the mask, so if you move your mask by 2% ever so slightly, that brings the effectiveness down to 0. The particle size of COVID, especially the Delta variant, is so small it passes right through the weave of a mask. The best analogy I've heard is it's like throwing sand at a chain link fence. It goes right through. So a mask in its entirety is not as effective as we want to believe. Yet we continue to mask our children. Social distancing, 3 feet, 6 feet. Do we really think COVID stops an imaginary stop sign at 3 and 6 feet? No. It travels up to 12 feet, up to 18 feet. Yet we continue to social distance our children. PCR testing, not as effective as we think, or accurate as we think, sorry. I could PCR test a patient today, in a couple of days they'll be positive. I had one patient, did 2 PCR tests at different testing facilities, the same day, one was negative, one was positive. A patient in the hospital, COVID positive, presumed COVID positive, tested negative each and every time. He tested positive finally upon discharge. So what I'm trying to tell you is we have been working with faulted guidelines from the very beginning, yet we have survived as a community. We have been working with faulted guidelines that were never tested, tried, and true. And whatever was tested was in a controlled laboratory-like setting that did not represent kids wearing masks. Sorry, did not represent kids wearing masks. And also, or conveniently had no control group. So those studies honestly have been debunked. And when those researchers were asked to defend their work and defend their study, they quoted an Israeli study. You can't use another study to defend your study. And when asked further, there was no comment. So basically, we're following these guidelines biblically, and there really is no concrete evidence behind any of it. And I noticed, okay, just what I say. I did want to comment. We just have to, I'm almost done. We have to stop treating COVID like it's the #1 killer in children. It's the 10th. It's not the top 2 or 3. The top killers are accidents and cancer. Yet I don't see mask mandates on enforcing child car seats or cancer prevention in children. We don't see mask mandates on any of that. So, I know. Last thing I want to say is you do have a panel of doctors. You have a panel of like 22 doctors you consult with. There is no concrete evidence that any of this is effective, that any of these measures actually prevent the transmission of COVID. If you want you can have 100 doctors on that panel, 100 scientists on that panel. You could have 100 doctors on that panel, 100 scientists on that panel. There is no concrete evidence. I'm almost done, I'm sorry.
No. Excuse me, ma'am.
I know.
If it wasn't a long line.
I know, just 5 seconds. If you really want concrete, I'm almost done, I'm sorry. If you really want concrete evidence, you know who you need to consult with? The parents. The parents can give you concrete evidence on how their children have become affected mentally, emotionally, socially, psychologically, academically, and every other elite there is. That's the concrete evidence.
Hi, my name is Michelle Frizaglia. I live at 115 Park Avenue. I'll just give you a quick anecdote. I unfortunately had COVID. I'm a teacher, and I firmly believe the masks and the distancing saved my students from contracting it from me, and I'm very thankful for that every day. I was in the classroom with them for 3 hours. So I am thankful for the measures we took to keep my students safe when I didn't know I had COVID.
I'm actually here on a different purpose. I'm representing the Eastchester PTA Council, which represents all our PTA units in the school district. Tonight, the Eastchester PTA Council would like to confirm its strong support for the work undertaken by the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Task Force. This year, the PTA Council has adopted the We Are Eastchester slogan to remind us of the value of local community. Efforts such as the DEI Task Force support hearing a wide range of perspectives. I think you've heard from the students tonight, that's something that's needed. And ultimately bring all members of this wonderful community closer together, making us one Eastchester United. We look forward to hearing the recommendations of the task force for the district and the community to consider. The PTA Council also makes a request of the district to include student participation in such efforts as soon as possible. We have heard from our students that this topic is of significant importance to them and that they would like to contribute to this important work. We hope the district will give the students a seat at the table and an opportunity to participate in this effort. Thank you, and I'll send this to you so you have it.
My name is Vanessa Mangello. I live on 124 Clarence Road, Scarsdale, New York, and I'm a mother of two daughters at the Eastchester School District. I come tonight with some concerns that are related to the new potential vaccine mandates for our 5 to 11-year-old children. As many of us have heard, the COVID vaccine is about to roll out for our younger school-age kids as soon as within the next few days. And while once again the idea of a mandate is something I cringe to hear, I know some folks truly believe in the effectiveness of these mitigation steps. And this is fine. We live in America where the freedom to choose is what makes our country the best place on earth. With that being said, the word mandate should be replaced with choice. And I say this not to upset you. In the last 18 months is the most unfortunate thing where we are becoming deeply divided as coworkers, friends, family members, and parents. We are not accomplishing a whole lot with this approach. If we want to see eye to eye, I think allowing the freedom of choice is our best hope. I can give some info that may help some people who disagree with the right to choose. And this is data that I collected from the American Academy of Pediatrics, which I believe is trustworthy to most. So as far as child hospitalization rates, this is recorded from May 2020 till October 14, 2021, with the highest rate of hospitalizations being in May 2020 at 3.8%, with a steadily decreasing number of 0.8%, which is what it is at this time presently. Now on to child mortality, which was recorded from May 2020 till October 14, 2021, with the highest percentage being in May 2020 at 0.06%, and has steadily decreased to a consistent 0.01%, which it is presently. These are numbers and facts that you can look up on the AAP website and see for yourself. While no death of a child is something any of us want, we also have to be honest with what we are doing to prevent it. There are many fears we all have as parents, and we want to protect our children at all costs. But some people may not agree that an experimental vaccine on our young children with a 99.9% survival rate is the choice for them. I hope that we could somehow unite by meeting in the middle and truly believe that the right to choose is our best option in doing so. Thank you.
Before you start, I just want to add a comment to that woman who just spoke and say, I don't think anybody wants vaccine mandates, and I'm speaking for myself here, but I presume nobody does. But that's something that's way out of our zone here. That's not a Board of Education issue. If that's your concern, then you got to find out who you're going to be voting for next week in all elections, wherever they are, and find out where they stand on that, because that's their issue. That's not our issue. If it comes down, we're gonna have to deal with it. But that's all I can say, so go ahead.
Hi, I'm Margaret Almodovar, and I'm a senior at EHS, and I wanted to further explain why our school would benefit from having the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Task Force. DEI is pretty new to our education system, so not many changes have been made, but it takes time to fix a learning environment that has been the same for quite a while. Times are changing, and students should become more aware of the real world and how different it is from Eastchester. As students, we are going to encounter people of different backgrounds, cultures, disabilities, and we shouldn't be unprepared to have them in our lives, because some people are stuck on the idea that learning about such sensitive topics is harmful. According to the DEI statement, they are not building a curriculum or choosing teaching methods. Instead, they're ensuring that students are learning in a safe and comfortable environment. And I'm confident that most of the teachers at the Eastchester schools have enough experience and are educated to know what should and should not be taught in their classrooms. And it's important that they are allowed to teach students about the real world and to expose them to realistic issues that we will normally experience after we graduate school. There aren't many people at our school who are people of color or minorities, and it causes others to forget about their culture, as it could seem weird even though it's just different. I have noticed that there are Eastchester students who are not exposed enough to different backgrounds and ideas, as I've heard people say racist, homophobic, sexist, and other harmful comments to others. I'm Filipino, and there are times when I felt insecure or out of place because a majority of my classmates are ignorant about my culture and don't realize that what they say can be offensive. Some people don't believe racism exists, which should not be the case if they were exposed or taught the experiences that many people face here and in the real world. These issues are norms in society, and it's better to learn about them now than later, as it can help prevent racism or culture shocks and can lead to people becoming open to change in the future. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Diana in case some of you don't know me. I'm a current senior at Eastchester, and I'm speaking in favor of the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion program. We have a major issue of inequality occurring at Eastchester on a daily basis. As a person of color in Eastchester, I witness racially motivated bullying either firsthand or witness it happening to my friends all the time. Yet it is rare that any serious consequences are ever being given to people who are threats to people of color. A black friend of mine was added into a group chat with around 10 white males and females, and was being spammed with the N-word while being told, "You're jealous, I can talk to a cop without getting shot." Not only is that extremely threatening, it puts a student at Eastchester in a situation where they fear going to school. And one of these students called my friend the N-word to her face in class, as well as calling a Hispanic student in their class a Mexican piece of. But no consequences seem to be given, and their actions are excused with an apology. We accept the administration's apologies, but this doesn't change the way we will never forget that students who are racist towards us believe they can attack other students verbally without fear of being suspended, parents being called, etc. While there are students who come here from Yonkers and are being suspended while called hoodlums, a gang member, or someone who engages in crime, by the administration for bullying white students, nothing is happening to our beliefs. We shouldn't have to try so hard to be heard by the administration. We shouldn't have to try so hard to convince you that we feel unsafe, just to be told that you can't do anything about it because it occurred outside of school, while other students are being suspended for bullying that occurs outside of school as well. Sorry. I'm not here to attack anyone, but we need support for our fellow students, and we need a change made. Bullying in the community is a school issue. Whether it's online or outside the school campus, it is a school issue if a student feels unsafe in the classroom. We need the DEI program so when situations like this continue to occur, we have somewhere to go. Discouraging the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion program will only make the people of color in our community feel more out of place than we already do. We need to work together in fixing these issues and bringing our community together to become a safe place for all people in Eastchester. Thank you.
If we accept and acquiesce in the face of discrimination,
We accept the responsibility ourselves and allow those responsible to solve their conscience by believing that they have our acceptance and our concurrence. We should therefore protest openly everything that's meant of discrimination or slander. A quote by Mary McLean, Bithia. Hi everyone, I'm Adriana Jones, and I'm a senior at EHS. Most of you probably don't know, but I'm the only black girl in the senior class, and there are only 4 black guys. So I'm hoping that you can understand, since there are very few of us, we also have little representation in East Chester. That quote I just read to you is something we should all go by, because it applies to all of us. And if you missed it, a good way to paraphrase it is, if we continue to allow discrimination to go right in front of us, we're basically giving the bully the okay to keep wrecking everything in their path. So instead of handling behind closed doors, we need to openly protest and stand up to the bully, the oppressor, and the racist. If we don't talk about it publicly, how do people know there's an issue that needs to be resolved? The answer is, they won't. Time after time again, I've had to deal with racist classmates, racist teachers, and racist parents. And I'm here to tell you, enough is enough. There is no reason why I should be hearing the N-word being thrown around school at a school football game. There is absolutely no reason why a white student should be telling another student on school grounds, "You effing N-word, go kill yourself." There is absolutely no reason for it. So I'm no longer gonna just sit, look pretty, and ignore. Instead, I'm going to open the conversation of racism in East Chester. But it's not just racism, honestly, it's all kinds of insensitivity. I mean, just last week, I heard a sophomore talking to his friend, saying, "You effing F-slur, go to hell." I should have told it to his face. I mean, why is there so much anger in the school? This should be concerned to all parents, teachers, and students. After hearing what comes from my classmate mouths, I don't think I can call the school a safe haven, because it isn't. And if you, meaning teachers, parents, and principals, can't create a safe haven for your students, what are you doing? We need to teach each other that hate does not belong here at East Chester, or anywhere really. Because what if one day it is too late? What if one day someone pushes your child to the edge, simply because of what they say? Who is there to blame then? The kid? The parent? We should blame ourselves. I'm just saying, that has happened to me. Too many students have pushed me to the edge, and I really can't take it anymore. Anyway, these are the topic conversations we need to be having here. This is why we need the DEI task force. This is why we cannot be handling issues of racism or bullying behind closed doors. It needs to be an open conversation so that your kids can feel safe and equal walking around the school. I hope you all go on tonight actually thinking about how your words affect kids and your classmates, and why it's time to say enough is enough. Thank you, and have a good night.
Thank you, speakers and Board of Ed. My name is Adam Weissman. I live in Garth Road. I'm an East Chester resident, obviously, and also East Chester class of 2000. I wanted to ask, well, first I want to comment to your point before about that we shouldn't be talking about vaccine mandates, but that's something about the elections and the board, you know, whatever, right? Because the FDA, we don't elect them. We don't elect the CDC. We don't really just elect, I believe, people on the Board of Health or whatever it is. We don't elect these people that are making all these decisions for our lives. And one of the questions, I guess, that I wanted to ask is after hearing that, to me, I mean, I'm not a contractor, I don't know, but $74 million seemed a little bit high, maybe, I don't know. I hope that wasn't the only company that made a plan or a presentation. I'm curious actually if they were the only one or if there was another one. But the other thing that I was really curious about was when they were making those projections about taxes. The lady in the purple was talking about the tax rates. Is that, and the 5-year projections and all that. So what I'm curious about is if New York State decides to mandate the vaccine for 5 to 11-year-olds and parents pull their children out of school to homeschool, because I'm sure many of them will, have you factored that in to your projections of how much money you'll be able to take from the people? Because realistically, this is something that is looming on the horizon. It's not something imaginary that we're talking about. We already know this is happening in California, and that we hear Dr. Fauci talking about, you know, how great it's going to be for 5 to 11-year-olds. We see what happens, and people, you know, little kids can't really walk out of school, can they? Parents have to stay home, but if parents are fired from their jobs for refusing a vaccine, then I guess they'll be around to homeschool. And it seems that what's going on with de Blasio in the city, that there's an awful lot of teachers that refuse to take the shot, that will be around to teach all these students of people who don't want their students, their children to get this shot. So I think, respectfully, it is something that you need to think about, because this is what you're here for. We elect you people to stand up for us, because we don't exactly have a voice to carry that message on. So my request or question to you is could you please carry the message on? And respectfully, really, for you, ma'am, reevaluate what your projections are, because I don't think that's necessarily accurate. Thank you. Everybody.
I know you're not going to like this, but can I ask you just to step aside, let the residents speak first, and then...
I'm an Eastchester resident.
No, you're not a school district resident.
Okay, I pay taxes to Eastchester.
And this is school district meeting, so, you know, I'm not trying to be disrespectful to you, because I know you, but if you could just... Residents first, and then we can have non-residents, and it's residents of the district, not of the town, not of the county, Eastchester School District. So once everyone's done, Jeff can speak. I want to make sure everyone goes first.
Hi, my name is Jan Harrison, and I live on Park Drive. First, I want to commend the students who consistently in the past several meetings have come full force with their feelings and their honest, authentic selves. And I think it's really important that they are heard and listened to, because they're describing what they're living inside the schools. Okay, it's their stories. You know, from my point of view, Eastchester schools desperately need a program to address the lack of diversity and inclusion. From the curriculum to unacceptable behavior by students to the current hiring practices, we have issues that need to be looked at honestly. Our kids deserve to engage in an environment that values everyone, irrespective of race. It is also important for children to see teachers and staff with different backgrounds, so that they can either identify with them or appreciate those who aren't like them. Some parents whose kids aren't affected don't see a problem. They have been indoctrinated to believe that somehow there are forces at work, from communists to secret groups out to demonize white people. It's just not true. DEI, a term welcomed by some and misunderstood by many, uses data to create change. It is a people-centered strategy that builds bridges within and among communities to foster a culture of respect, trust, and understanding. Diversity, equity, and inclusion should not just be buzzwords. They should be purposeful and deliberate concepts, centering people's lived experience and culture, helping them become their best and most authentic selves. Meaningful DEI strategy is not just grounded in conversations, it's grounded in action. It is anchored in the realization that people of color in this country have markedly different life experiences based on the color of their skin. Recently, the Eastchester homecoming football game provided an opportunity to see how kids need to understand the world they live in and the consequences of not thinking what it's like to not be in the mainstream. A boy brought a speaker to the game, and while in the stands played a rap song, he played the clean version right? He played the version without the N-word. But he and other kids thought it would be fun to sing it loudly with the N-word. It wasn't funny. Certainly not to my daughter and to other black kids that were standing there. This makes them feel unsafe. And it's not okay. And it's happening too often. I've been excoriated by this community, and I'm not surprised that there are some parents that have formed a group that wants to eradicate the diversity, equity, and inclusion initiative, as they don't think there is a problem. There is. What happens in our schools is reflective of what happens in our town. We can and should do better. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Michelle Lawler, and I have 3 kids in the district. I would first like to thank the Board of Ed members who selflessly volunteer their time for the betterment of our kids. You are truly appreciated. I'm truly outraged from what I'm hearing tonight, insinuating our students are racist or somehow insensitive because they played a rap song at a pep rally and sang the lyrics to it. Those accusations are outrageous, and they're simply not true. It's a ploy once again to push a social agenda in the schools. I'm here tonight to implore the board to shut down any and all political agendas that are now being pushed onto our kids and into our school districts across the state. When my daughter was in 8th grade health, she was taught about gender fluidity, gender identity, and use of pronouns. The notion that a boy can be a woman simply because he believes it is ridiculous. Okay? We are now seeing biological men decimating women in women's sports. Who's protecting our girls? You are confusing our kids, and ironically, this is not based in science, but instead a social justice agenda. I'm also against CRT, which is just masked as a DEI task force in schools. Is there criteria in place to make sure that teachers present material in a neutral and non-biased way? My freshman daughter came home just last week with an assignment about the N-word. I emailed the teacher and the principal. The teacher called me and we had a very respectful dialogue where we agreed to disagree. In my opinion, I felt the author gave a pass to the N-word when it was used in rap music, referring to that as prerogative reappropriation, and sent the wrong message regarding, and I quote, racial ugliness in our country. That's not America, and the data supporting that doesn't exist. Another social justice agenda. When you focus so much on race and group people as oppressors and oppressed, you separate people into groups, and they are no longer individuals. They are their race, gender, cultural identity, when they're so much more than those things. Our race is a small part of who we are. You also teach a group of children that they are victims when really success comes down to making good choices in your life, and everybody has the power to do that. And once again, I just cannot believe that there were people that came up here to this microphone and suggested and insinuated that our students are these racist, horrible people. It's outrageous, and thank you for your time tonight.
Dave Carfloro, Garth Road. Kind of fun to be on this side of the mic. I just had a question about the 74.8 million cost. Lisa, is this the final number? Is this what we're going out with?
No, I don't think so. We're
Okay,
still-
because what Vito said about the asbestos, I think it's something we should keep in mind here. I pitched 2 bonds. I've been at about 200 facilities committee meetings. And I think, you should be all-inclusive here. If you're going to open all these buildings, it's going to be cost-efficient to do what we have to do. I don't mind paying some extra taxes. My kids are done, but I'll still pay them. But, spend money wisely. And I just want to make one other point. Just to echo something Janet said, I'm absolutely impressed by our students here. I think they're absolutely eloquent, certainly more than me. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Hello, board. Thomas Fix, Highview Avenue, Eastchester, New York. I kind of had a prepared statement here, and I'd like to diverge from that. Thank you for your service. I know it's a very challenging task, both dealing with the community and dealing with the establishment, the government, and all that. I'm here primarily because I'm concerned about how the local school district, and not to blame you guys, but local schools are losing their power to serve the community, okay? The discussions that are going on here tonight are going on in school districts across the country, which means that these issues are not organically coming up from within the community. They're being fed from other areas, whether it be the state or the federal government. Okay? I don't think, it's outside sources, it really is, okay? I don't think a lot of people are aware, it wasn't until about 1980 that the federal government's expansion and control over our school system that's where it really kind of started to fester and to expand. And since that point, we've seen so much of an agenda being pushed on a local school system, and it's tied to funding and getting our own money back in order to push an agenda which is basically to indoctrinate our kids, okay? And they're going to use all these, whether it be diversity and all these other social issues, which we as citizens, we as good Americans can work out amongst ourselves. They are trying to push these small diversions between us in order to divide us so that they can pull a scam on us, okay? So we don't know what's going on behind the curtain, okay? And then what happens is, as a diverse community, we're losing our freedoms, okay? You've heard it brought up, with the whole COVID situation. It's not that it's not real, it is. And it was a very challenging situation. And as a community, we handled it. But now we're on the other side of it, and we should be moving forward. Okay, we have seen at the state and the federal level how so many of the people we went to as being the go-to people for are at fault and have not been giving us pertinent information. All too often, racial issues and all the other social issues that are being brought up are not genuine. They're being manufactured in order to divide us and keep us from becoming the tight-knit, great community we are. So I implore on the board to start pushing back. You could even use as an example the funding for the additions they want to do. I guarantee you, because of state mandates and federal mandates, the cost of that has gone up exponentially versus having it done at more of a local level where it's going to be more manageable for us as a community. Thank you very much.
Hi, my name is Jeff Zuckerman. I live on Bronx Street in Tuckahoe. I taught for many, many years. I came to many board meetings like this in Bronxville and other places. I want to say how heartened I am tonight to have heard from all the students and the PT Council and the thoughtful, incredibly courageous stuff that was brought up tonight. We have a fringe element here on the town of Eastchester. They make the most noise at these meetings, and you board members have to know. You have to have heard tonight that it's a fringe element. And I never felt better in my life leaving a meeting. I thought it was going to be hard. And in fact, the really courageous and intelligent voices came to the fore. I listened to someone at a Texas school board meeting last week, like the fringe element in Texas, so you can imagine. And what he said was, you want to talk about revisionist history. That's what you're doing with our kids in social studies here in this Texas town, revisionist history. Well, I said we look into the Holocaust. and prove that it didn't happen that way. Can you imagine telling the American, British, Canadian, French troops and the Russians, all who liberated concentration camps, that they all came up with a story? It didn't happen. None of it was real. None of the people they found, none of the bones they got, none of it was real. That's what this fringe element in Texas was saying. And you know we have that here in Eastchester. And you know that these amazing kids, the PT Council, the amazing people that had the courage to come out here tonight, even in the face of the very loud and vocal small group of people with their special website and Facebook pages with less than 100 people on it, those people are not going to run the school board in Eastchester. You are too smart for that. You know exactly where this is all coming from. Thank you so much for doing the amazing job you do. I appreciate it.
Anybody in the back, please, if you're going to talk, take it outside. Thank you. Just be quiet as you're leaving. Other people want to speak.
Looks like I'm last.
Possibly.
That would be nice, right? Do I want to go home? Julie Fortier, Sylvan Avenue in Tuckahoe, Eastchester Schools. Thank you everyone here for your time and patience with all of us and discussing all of, should I be like this?
No, closer.
Closer. I think you need to rethink this venue. We were packed like sardines over there. A bunch of people not wearing masks or halfway. I don't think this is the right venue for this meeting. If we're going to continue to have people invited from outside the town, especially if you're going to present some DEI initiatives in January, this is going to be packed. So I think you may want to consider another venue for this. I've seen some of the videos from other boards where they're in auditoriums, so people have more space, right? Especially during this time. And there's just more room for everyone. So I think you may want to consider that, or going back to the cafeteria. Another thing I want to mention, just out of respect for everyone in the audience and people who are speaking, one thing I came across as well in researching other boards is, just being stricter with people in how they're, sort of showing their colors, let's say. So for example, in Yorktown, I heard that they actually asked people to stop booing, heckling, and clapping. So it's actually, what I saw in meetings is actually very civil. And it doesn't become about like, well, this group has more people and they're bringing people from Yonkers than compared to this group of people, so they're clapping louder, right? So I just think this might be something you want to consider, so that also you as a board don't let yourself be just influenced by the fact that there's like more people here one night than another night. So anyway, I wasn't prepared to speak, but this was not great tonight for a venue, so I appreciate you taking this in consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Nobody else is stepping up to the mic, so that brings us to comments from the board. So why don't we go around the table? Jackie, I'll start over there. I'll start over here. Kate, put you on the spot. Any comments? Pass. Christy, you want to say anything? Joe? I figured you're going to be like me.
Yeah, I do want to say just a couple of things. I wanted to, respond to a few of the comments. I want to acknowledge and agree with one of the things that Mr. Fix said, that I do believe that there's a lot of forces dividing us, and there are bad actors dividing us, and I think that we do, as a board and as a community, owe it to ourselves and certainly to our children to come together. I want to acknowledge Mrs. Johnson's, and thank Mrs. Johnson for pointing out the SEL, the social emotional learning page, and point you to it so everyone can read it. It's on the district website under academics. You scroll down, click on social emotional learning. Mrs. Johnson referenced the comprehensive camp counseling district plan for 2020 and 21. And I'm actually proud of that. So, you know, I think it was an important thing that we put in place in the middle of COVID when children had been pulled out of school in March, as we all remember so cogently. Some of those children suffered losses in their immediate family. All of those children suffered the anxiety of social isolation from their peers and friends, and really, you know, like all of us, experienced an upending of their world as they knew it and their routine, and that's very difficult for children at all ages. And so I was part of the board at that time that approved this plan and approved the budget for this plan, added counselors to the guidance counselors to the K-5 school age children, added a social worker. I mean, we really dedicated time to it. And I just want to say that it is highlighting student mindsets and behaviors, as well as academic development, career development, social emotional development. I do believe, and I want to be transparent about my belief, that schools are in their lane to care about the social emotional learning and welfare of students. This does include career development. It includes counseling. Some students need counseling because they're struggling with the stress of being in a back to school, academic pressures, isolation from peers, eating alone at the lunch table. These are in the lane of school, and I believe we need to take care of our children. And that social emotional learning is an important part of the educational system. So I encourage you to go look for that, and I appreciate that that was pointed out. I think everyone should look at it and read it and know what we did that year. That brings me to wanting to recognize in particular one student, I believe Ms. Johnson, who self-identified as the only African-American student in the senior class. You know, one thing she said, African-American female student in the senior class, one thing she said was she feels unsafe. And I think that's something that we are accountable for. It's something that we as a community are accountable for. Her feelings and her experiences are not something that any outsider can label as authentic or inauthentic, but as a school board, I care very much when I hear any student, for any reason, say they're feeling unsafe. Because when you're feeling unsafe, you're not in a healthy learning environment, and we are accountable for that. And I think as a community, we're all accountable for that as well.
Yeah, absolutely, Rob.
A little on order here, but I wanted to just correct one statement that was made along the lines. There was a comment made that, you know, the counseling had taken place without consent, without permission. I'm not aware that that has happened at any time. And we follow all laws and guidelines with regard to parental consent for counseling. And we don't offer clinical counseling, but any time that counseling would require parental consent, we do offer it, and I'm not aware of any situation in which it was denied or not offered. And should I ever become aware of that, I would act upon that and correct that.
Thanks for that clarification.
I just want to say that I agree with what Sharon said. I don't know that I can say anything better, but I'll add that as a school district, you know, it's not just about academics, right? If we were just about academics, we wouldn't have sports, we wouldn't have art, we wouldn't have music. It's about a holistic view of the child. And the full health of the child is what the school is responsible for. So I also agree that we're stepping out of the lane by making sure that the kids have safe places to be and that the kids have social emotional well-being. So
Okay. John, anything?
We had one commenter that was talking about the ticket price on bond and you know, whether or not we'd kind of out to other bidders for this. You know, I know our architect and our construction manager has spent months working on this, and we've spent quite a bit of money paying them to develop this plan. So I don't think it's practical at this point to try to start over and get a second bid on anything like that. Though, you know, I definitely empathize with that feeling, and I wonder if, and I'm not sure what this would look like, but if we could get some kind of gut check. I mean, could we get, you know, somebody else to look it over, some sort of architect, just a gut check. We're going to spend $75 million just to say, okay, is this a little bit of a second opinion on this? I mean, I think it would behoove us to spend a little bit of money to do that. So I think that's something maybe we could talk about either at the next meeting or with the admin offline.
I actually think that's a great idea, and I think we should look into that, so.
I'll defer to Lisa and others on the team, but I do believe that right now you're doing estimation.
Yeah.
And then you're going to go into a competitive bidding process down the line. But, you know, you can still check the numbers through additional estimation, I suppose, but.
Well, I just want to say that in the past, this district has embarked upon capital projects with only an architect. Sometimes a construction manager has been brought in later on in the process when the building starts. This is really the first time in recent history that we've come out of the gate with an architect in place and a construction manager in place. And that really is the check and balance, right? The construction manager is consistently questioning the architect. What is it that you're building? What is it that you're designing? And they're pricing it to make sure that whatever they're designing, we know the cost of, so that there are no surprises when we start building this. So I feel like that's the purpose of the construction manager. They serve as a check and balance to each other. I think that there's no way of getting around the fact that we have to do this work. I don't think that it's, you know, we can take a tour. You can see with your own eyes the things that are rotting, the switches that don't work, the plumbing that's failing, the heating systems that don't work. You know, so I don't know that, I don't think it's a question of whether we need to do this or not. I mean, perhaps you could question their design. But again, I feel like that's what we're paying the construction manager to do. And I don't think at this point it's practical to bring someone, I mean, our architects did our building condition survey. We paid them over $80,000, I believe, to do that. They spent months here. They brought in consultants to walk through with them. They know our buildings very well. To bring somebody else in at this point, it would just be a very superficial, and I don't really see the value in that. That's just my opinion.
I just wanted to pick up on the idea of a tour, because I think it's a good one. And we did do a tour of facilities in summer of 2019, and, you know, so that many of the board members were, you know, weren't on that tour. And I think it was really elucidating to have Ed here show us some of the items that are included in this plan. And I would also suggest, because we did it with the high school bond, in the January, February period when we're doing sort of public outreach and education and having forums, that we take community members on such a tour. We did that with the high school bond. I saw the temporary classrooms as a parent. I saw the old cafeteria. And it's important to lay eyes on these things to the extent that we can, because I understand a lot of it is behind walls and under the, you know, in the ceiling, but I think there is a lot we can see, and so I would appreciate the opportunity to have that tour, and I think many community members would appreciate it as well when we get closer to having these public discussions if we get to that point.
Okay, any other comments?
Yeah, I mean, you know, I know Lisa, you said you didn't think it, you know, would have a lot of value and it would be superficial. I think I am looking for something that is a little bit superficial. Like I said, we don't have the months to spend going through this all again. I think one of the benefits is, you know, the person that spoke tonight and myself, we're not the last people that are going to ask do you have a second opinion on this? And when we go out to the community, it might help if we say, yeah, we gut checked this, we found somebody, we paid them, low five figures to just kind of go over and take a tour and say, yeah, this really is what you need, or, here's something, maybe this could wait 5, 10 years, something like that. But, and I think, even if there was no other value and we still went with this, I think there would be value in selling it to the community if we really went through every single, gut check and balance.
Okay. Anything else? Anybody else? Anything? Okay, there being none. I guess that's it. Our next meeting will be November 9th. We're going to have a short exec session on some contracted personnel, I think. So if I could get a recess for that. Judith, second. Jackie, everybody in favor? Thank you. Good night, everyone, and I hope the kids send us those emails. Thank you.